Who's concerned?
Get it back to me after the.
I'd like to call the regular board meeting of March 13th, 2018 to order. I'd like to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk, will you take roll call, please? I'm missing a pen.
Liz Smith, absent. Andrea Voorhees,
Present.
Mike Powell,
Here.
Scott Ruggles,
Here.
Mr. Roman,
Here.
Mr. Willie, sir, Mr. Colwell.
Here. Thank you very much, Mr. Clerk. Let's move on to item number 5, which is public comment. This is for any items that are not on the agenda. Again, not on the agenda. You'll have opportunities to speak during the meeting on items that are. I beg your pardon? Yes.
You missed approval.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Go ahead. I beg your pardon. Go ahead.
Mr. Supervisor, we need, in front of all of the board members tonight are 3 additionals that need to be placed on the agenda. One is the Dublin carpet to be placed under item 11D. The other one is a discussion on cemetery lots, which is 11E, and also a new list of bills dated 3/2/18.
Okay, looking for approval on the agenda. Looking for a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as with the additions.
Motion?
Support.
Motion, support. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. Now moving on to public comment. I beg your pardon. Okay. Again, for any item that is not on the agenda. Moving on to the consent agenda. Item number 6. Consent agenda is a list of bills, revenues, expenses, check disbursements, and department reports.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda with the addition of the new list of bills.
I have a motion to approve the agenda, a motion to approve the consent agenda. Looking for support. A motion and support. All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes
Mr.
have it.
Supervisor,
Yes.
would you also maybe introduce our
Yes,
planning
I will.
commission appointment?
Now that we have the consent agenda done, I would like to draw the crowd's attention to our newest member of our planning commission, Joseph Seward. He's an attorney, and he is going to be joining our planning commission with Mr. David Loosley, who is also an attorney, who left in December.
That's correct.
Retired from the planning commission in December. So welcome aboard, and we look forward to working with you. And we're very pleased that you're taking interest to serve the community. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Item number 7, presentations. Chief?
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I'm here to present a life-saving award. Officer Snow, come on in around the corner. There she is. Where's Jason at? Jason Fuller? Oh, there he is. Go ahead, sir. Stay right next to it. On February 13, 2018, at approximately 5:42 in the evening, Mr. Fuller was at the Leo's Coney in White Lake. While Mr. Fuller was eating, he swallowed a piece of food, which became lodged in his airway, not allowing him to breathe. At that time, Officer Snow, who was off duty and with her family, was sitting at an adjacent table in the restaurant. Officer Snow heard the commotion from Fuller's table and looked over to see Fuller standing up, grasping at his neck and giving signs that he could not breathe. Without hesitation, Officer Snow ran to Fuller and began performing the Heimlich maneuver. Officer Snow continued the performance of the Heimlich maneuver until Fuller coughed up the food, clearing his airway and allowing him to breathe again. Members of the White Lake Township Fire Department and STAR arrived on scene and evaluated Mr. Fuller, where he refused further treatment. The video we're about to show shows another patron assisting Mr. Fuller without success. All the other patrons in the restaurant appeared to be unable to provide assistance. It is my belief that had Officer Snow not reacted in the quick and calm fashion that she did, Fuller would not have had immediate life-saving measures done and would not have been alive today. go ahead and play it. There's no sound, but you'll see Mr. Fuller on the right. See, then we'll try to give him the Heimlich. There's Officer Snow coming on over quickly and performing the Heimlich. Now, I want to express that the Heimlich is not a one and done. You do it until the food is dislodged.
Break his ribs?
Only 3.
Nope, it's not out yet.
The other guy keeps eating. He's not concerned.
There it comes. There it goes. I will tell you that Leo's makes really, really good soup because that guy below there just keeps on going at it.
Just that one day they had a really vicious chicken. They got rid of all those.
So I am proud to present this life-saving commendation to Police Officer Jessica Snow in recognition of life-saving service to the community. This award is given with a heartfelt gratitude.
Very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. So cool. Okay, thank you, Chief. Thank you, Jessica, for your service. We certainly appreciate it. Next is the Huron Valley Community Coalition.
Good evening, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to come and meet with you this evening. Thanks, Chief Keller, for inviting me. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Huron Valley Community Coalition or what our mission is, but it is to prevent substance use amongst youth in our Huron Valley schools. I've been on this job about 3 years, and I've learned a lot about how this work is actually accomplished. And first thing we like to do is identify what's going on in our community, what we call local conditions. So we work on identifying what the kids have been doing through the MyFi survey that they do at school, police reports, and that sort of thing. And once we do that, we find appropriate ways to address that. The packet that I passed out to you includes the yellow sheet that identifies the 7 strategies for community change. The first 3 are kind of the easier ones, where we provide information and we help people in the coalition enhance their skills. We provide support, like alternative activities for the kids to give them something to do rather than just wandering around looking for trouble, like a lot of us did when we were young. But the last 4 are a little trickier, and they include kind of a longer-term effort. Amongst those things is to work with municipalities to talk about how local ordinances might affect things like, well, currently there's a problem with vaping in our schools. I don't know if you've heard a lot about that. There's been a lot of suspensions. This is something that's been going on around the country. I talked to my colleagues at conferences all over the country, and the same thing is happening. And it's really difficult because parents and students don't really identify that as a dangerous substance to use, when in fact it is. There's nicotine and a lot of other chemicals there. So the laws have really not caught up to that yet. So there's not a lot of local ordinance or even state laws about selling to people under 18. So one of the things we might do as a coalition is talk to folks who make those kinds of decisions, explain to them. That's my cell phone. Great. Sorry. You know, I swore I turned that off when I came in here. Hope everybody likes the monkeys. All the people who shouldn't be doing that, right? Thanks, Pam. It ends pretty soon. It's only one verse. So, that's in my coat. Isn't that crazy? So anyway, I apologize for that. We're working on that with the school district as well, which is another environmental sort of strategy where we try to get them to change their policies, maybe about just punitive consequences, maybe alternative consequences such as an educational component. We're located, by the way, near Milford High School. The school district is our fiscal agent. They provide accounting support and all kinds of other help around the school, which is really great. We get phone service and internet and that sort of thing. We're also funded by the Drug Free Community Support Grant, which is a federal grant, and locally through the Alliance of Coalitions for Healthy Communities, which is the 18 coalitions around Oakland County. So we're running on a budget of about $165,000 a year after about 3 years ago when I took this job as a part-time deal for about $20,000. So we ramped it up quite a bit lately, and I'm doing everything I can do to create awareness in the community. You may have seen some of the stuff that we've got going on, some of the activities, for example. Like if you look on the left-hand side of that packet you have there behind the 7 strategies, the next event we have coming up is, I think, our 4th presentation of Drugs 101. We're putting a stronger focus on vaping for that. That is at, that's the next one is at Muir Middle School on the 20th. And then we have another one on May 1st at Oak Valley. And the public is welcome. It's all adults. It's not for kids, but parents and other interested adults who want to know everything there is to know about youth substance use can get it in about 2 hours. And it goes pretty fast. And when I first started doing it, I thought maybe people would be losing people during that 2 hours, but they do tend to stick around, ask questions afterwards. It's very informative. So I strongly urge people to come to that if you really want to know what's going on quickly with our kids. The other thing we're doing at Lakeland High School on April 14th is a wellness expo. We did that last year in conjunction with the hospital, and they were going to do a lot of the promotional stuff, and to be honest, it didn't really work out the way we had hoped. We had a lot of vendors there, but not as many people from the community, so we're focusing more on family activities. We're going to have some fun stuff for the kids to do, and that's another one I would urge you to get to if you can. And on the right side of that packet, I put in some of the educational stuff that we pass out. And these are the things that really talk to the issues that we have in our community. Alcohol, I'm sure Dan can tell you this, is still far and away the biggest problem that kids have. Well, we're concerned with marijuana and opioid drugs and that sort of thing, and tobacco. But alcohol, really, by the numbers, is still the number one problem we have. One of the local conditions that we're concerned about is that parents, for some reason, still think that it's okay to have parties and let their kids drink alcohol in a lot of cases. As we know, that's not really true. It's illegal even if it's your own kids. So we're really working harder this year as we come into the prom and graduation and spring break time on this Parents Who Host Lose the Most campaign. There's also the underage drinking is not a minor problem. This is a toolkit that gives people some warning signs and what they can do to prevent that, alcohol youth drinking, how to talk to your kids, and some other resources. And the other one behind that, which is kind of a hot topic these days, is the preventing marijuana use amongst youth. There's been a big shift. I think a lot of you may know that there's some talk about getting recreational marijuana on the ballot in November, and it looks like that's got a good chance of happening. And there are some unintended consequences for our kids that I think we should be concerned about. Just the sheer fact that there's more availability makes it more likely that they're going to use, as we found out in Colorado and Wyoming. And that piece that's in there will give you some real science behind why it's particularly bad for youth to be using marijuana. And in the back of that, in case the people who are questioning our sources, you can see that there's a good scientific basis for all that information. We're looking to build the coalition as fast as we can, trying to get a lot of volunteers, because with 2 people on staff, it's kind of hard to do anything besides kind of get things organized. And I feel like we're finally getting to that point. We've got a real strong board going now with 12 sector representatives, as they're called, from different segments of our society here in or our community here in Huron Valley Schools. So I think we're there, and I think we've learned a lot through the coursework we've done over the last 2 years. And now it's time for us to really let that knowledge hit the road and have some impact. I'm meeting with parent groups, PTO organizations, and having opportunities like this to invite folks to call us, contact us if they want to volunteer, or if there are any other questions about a particular substance or how you can help in our community. And I know you've got a heavy agenda tonight, so I'm going to wrap it with that, although I'd like to invite any questions if anybody has anything they'd like to know about. Yes, sir.
I was reading the other day, and I didn't know whether or not you've experienced the detergent packets. Is that an issue in this area?
Well, I've heard some of that. I hate to laugh about that because it does seem sort of ridiculous to
Yes,
think
it
about
does.
that. It's not something that we've addressed as a substance use issue. I haven't heard a lot of complaints from the schools or from parents asking for help with that. So I take it that's more of a prank sort of a thing, or it's just sort of a gag trying to trick people into doing that sort of thing, but it's not on the same level as the
Okay.
other drugs.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Have you
Yes.
seen any issues?
Can you stand and identify?
Have you seen any issues with pill mills, doctors, just freely handing out things, and thus these adults have it in their house, and then the kids are using? How do you prevent that? I mean,
Well,
that's legal.
Thanks for that question. Right. Anecdotally, we'll hear some stuff. Of course, we're not in the law enforcement business, and so, but it is important for us to get out amongst the medical community and talk to them, because surprisingly, some of the doctors aren't aware of the dangers of overprescribing opioid medicines. So, but the flip side of that is, of course, that's all the news. While opioid medications tend to really have their devastating effect a little bit older than the kids we work with, it starts around 18 to 25. We really need to work with the kids. That's what we're a prevention organization, right? So we want to catch them earlier, make sure that that the kids know the dangers, that the parents know about it, that they have that people in the community like grandma and grandpa know to get the medicines out of their bathrooms and lock them up if they can. We even talk to the realtors in the area about when they have open houses, they think about telling their clients to lock up jewelry and that sort of thing, but they also need to talk to folks about getting the prescription medications out of their bathrooms, even putting them in the bedroom somewhere to get them out of those private places where nobody knows what they're doing. So that part of it, the doctor, the pill mill kind of thing, is not really what we do. We do try to do educational, kind of a wholesale educational process for everybody. Anything else?
Will you be available as far as information? How can we get a hold of you?
Absolutely. You all have my card there, and if anybody would like to go to our website, it's hvcoalition.org. You can find all of our contact information there, along with information about specific issues regarding youth substance use. Our Facebook page, we update that 2, 3, 4 times a week. You'll find out what activities are coming up. We try to put the latest information that we get about things such as vaping, which is really kind of on the cutting edge of some problems we have now. And you can always call my office, which, as I said, our coalition Facebook page and our website has that information. So and I've got my cell phone on that stuff. I don't mind. This is serious business. We're trying to save kids' lives. If you need to call me at night or on the weekends, feel free. I'm happy to do it. Yes.
Are you just into the education, or do you do counseling that parents can contact you?
No, we do not do counseling. That's more on the recovery and treatment side of things. We have some resources that we can refer people to, though. So we'd be happy to talk to people about that too. So.
I have a question. Is there anything as a board that we can do better to support you?
Well, as a matter of fact, there's a couple of things. I was reluctant to bring this up, but I think because it's still kind of a new thing that I'm working on. But what I really have in my mind is to come up with a, I'm calling it a municipal youth task force. What I'd really like to do is get a couple of trustees from all the townships in the village and have them meet on a regular basis with us. So we've got a conduit for this information, because it's not only about us getting information to you. We need to hear what's going on in your communities from your perspective too. That's why we have the 12 sectors on our board, to get all the different viewpoints. So I will actually be sending a letter to ask if there are a couple of people who might be interested on that, but I need to kind of formulate exactly what I would ask you to do in that case. So other than that, if you can make yourselves available when I call, I'd sure appreciate it, because I'd like to talk about things such as, well, let's take the vaping thing for instance. If we could talk about how effective a local ordinance might be to make sure that the smoke shops and the gas stations and those folks aren't selling these electronic cigarettes to kids.
Okay, please include me in your letter. I'd be happy to support you and help you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Okay, I'm sure if you get us the information, you'll get some response.
Great.
So,
Thank you very much. It's really important work, and it's nothing short of saving kids' lives, and I need all the help I can get. Thank you.
Thank you.
very much appreciate it. Okay, moving on to item 7C, which is a Brownfield Redevelopment Authority approval process presentation. Mr.
Okay.
O'Neill.
Yes, this pertains to the Four Corners project at Cooley Lake Road and Union Lake Road, and Mr. Brad Hansen, who is here from Oakland County Economic Development and Community Affairs, is going to give you a program overview. He is our local expert, and then I think the developers have maybe some further information to give you. Tonight is not necessarily you taking action on this, it's getting information and then giving direction to the staff and to the county as to how you might like to proceed. This is a draft resolution that Brad supplied to me just for you to kind of look over to acquaint yourself with. It was done for the city of Pontiac last year. And Brad, I don't think this will work from there, so if you want to nod at me or tell me to switch slides, I'll do it from here if you'd like.
Okay. Good evening. Been asked to come out here to give you a brief update or overview of the Brownfield program in Oakland County's Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, or OCBRA. Sean, if you want to hit the slide here. Quick, just to go over what a brownfield is. It's any property where real or perceived environmental conditions cause a barrier to full use. A facility is definition used to define contaminated land. So that's the number one way you can be classified as a brownfield, is through a facility or contaminated land. You can also be adjacent or contiguous to a brownfield contaminated piece of land or in a land bank. In a non-core community, which White Lake Township is not a core community, functionally obsolete, blighted, and historic resource can also be considered a brownfield. However, there's less eligible activities that can be reimbursed through tax increment financing to developer to help with their costs. Next slide. Brownfield Development Authority. Authority is the avenue in order to pass a brownfield plan in order to get incentives for the cleanup activities for the site. The key component there is tax increment financing, or TIF. If you're not familiar with TIF, I'm assuming most of you are. It's just the capture over base level of tax value that's increased on the site after redevelopment. It's eligible to be captured by the authority and reimbursed back to the developer to help offset their costs over a set number of years. So in the beginning, the developer has to come up with the money to clean it up, but through their taxes that they pay, they get reimbursed through the authority to help cover those costs. With a brownfield plan that gets passed, all those eligible activities are listed in there, and so the developer will turn in their invoices to the authority. We will review them and send them out for a third-party review. Only work that's been done, identified in the brownfield plan, and invoiced that are proven that they were paid is eligible to be reimbursed to the developer. So in a brownfield plan, the numbers can be a little bit higher, but it's the actual numbers that are spent in, on the cleanup that are reimbursed over a set number of years. If the project is going for state school tax capture, which is roughly about 50% of the reimbursement of the taxes, it has to go through a separate process. It's called 381 work plan. For environmental costs, it goes to MDEQ for approval, and for non-environmental costs, it goes to MEDC or the Michigan Strategic Fund MSF board for their full approval, which could add another month or two onto the time frame. Per state statute, the brownfield payback period is up to 30 years. It could be 35 years if in the first 5 years there's no activity. But state statute calls for an actual capture of 30 years. If the developer's not paid back in that time period, that's all he's going to get. He or she's going to get. Switch slides. Miscellaneous about the Brownfield Authority. Interest on projects may be reimbursed to the developer. In Oakland County's BRA, we have a different stance. We generally do not allow interest to be captured on projects unless there's unusual circumstances where for whatever reason the project won't move forward and it's a vital project for the county. We may entertain it at that point, but generally we do not allow interest to start off with. There's a 15% contingency that we include in the Brownfield plan, just in case of any cost overruns. They'll be already in the plan, so that way we don't have to go through the whole process of amending the Brownfield plan to get those costs included. Each BRA is allowed to capture admin fees in what we call what's defined as a revolving loan fund. Admin fees obviously is helping for any administration that needs to be done at the county level, and the revolving loan fund is captured at the end of the project of the last 5 years, and that allows you to have set aside money for future brownfield projects for a revolving loan fund, so you can loan money out to brownfield projects, because that's one thing that is hard for the developers at this point. If there's any contamination on it, it's harder to get a loan through the banks or credit unions. So hopefully that'll help in the future. Obviously, staff is vital importance to following these projects through. Brownfield plan and eligible activities. Here's where the developer will get reimbursed, what the developer will get reimbursed for. Baseline environmental activities, this actually determines if the site is actually a facility or contaminated. That goes into sampling and analysis. Due care activities is investigation to define the contamination and contamination treatment or removal of the contamination from the site. Additional response activity includes evaluation, demo, lead and asbestos abatement, and sampling, and other necessary actions to protect human health and safety. The benefits of brownfield redevelopment is clean up contamination and protect environmental assets, urban revitalization and full use of existing infrastructure, and the creation of new jobs and taxes. Just a few, I have 3 examples in the PowerPoint, and what Mr. O'Neill handed out to you is actually our progress report, where we have our last probably 10 projects over the last 2.5 years roughly. But the 3 I point out here is this gas station in Independence Township. It was vacant since 2009. It's currently demoed, and the new retail center is going up there. $84,000 was eligible activities for the developer to be reimbursed over a set number of years. An estimated 15 full-time jobs will be created from this project. Next one is PM Environmental, which we actually have folks from PM Environmental here. This is their Michigan headquarters.
It's just our
Oakland County office. This is the city of Berkeley. So they took a old facility and but $750,000 investment, $400,000 in outdoor activities, and 30 full-time jobs, which I'm sure you guys are right there. Then the last one is the former Sears building and service garage in the city of Pontiac. That's dating back to, I believe, in 1929, the former Sears building. That was turned into a $20 million development of 46 1- and 2-bedroom apartments, a 10,000 square foot market, and you can flip the slide, Sean, and Anytime Fitness. The process. So with Oakland County's BRA, we have a lot of input from the local cities, villages, or townships. In order for our project to go to our Oakland County BRA, we need 2 resolutions from the local, in this case, township. One is a resolution of understanding, we call it. It basically releases the project to the OCBRA in order us to go forward with it. The next one is a concurrent resolution. Basically, that just states that you're familiar with the project, you have no issues with the project moving forward, and you concur with the provisions of Brownfield plan in order to move forward. One important step also is what we call a local host committee, and that consists of one of our OCBRA members and a chief elected official from the city, village, or township, or his or her designee, to meet and discuss the Brownfield plan to see if there's any questions or concerns, get those all answered, and move forward at that point. If at any point the city, village, or township has any issues with the Brownfield plan and votes no, the project is over. The county does not obviously move forward because we don't have local support on it. Once we get through those 2 resolutions, it goes through our Oakland County process, which is the OCBRA. Then we have 2 Board of Commissioners subcommittee meetings, which is the Economic Development and Community Affairs Subcommittee and the Finance Subcommittee. We get through those, and it goes to the full Board of Commissioners for a public hearing and the final vote. And as I stated before, if it's going for state school taxes, there's 381 work plan process that goes to MDEQ and MEDC. Typically, depending on how our Board of Commissioners schedule lays out, we can get this done within 2 months. We try to streamline as much as possible, and that's why we like meeting with the communities up front, with developers, make sure everybody's on the same page. Contact information's in there, and like I said, the additional information, just our projects over the past 2.5 years. Be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Powell.
I noticed, and it wasn't really clear whether or not the reimbursement included any development costs or just cleanup costs,
Just cleanup costs.
right? Because I didn't understand what the job creation was about.
We just like that as a metric to keep track of how many jobs are actually created from one of these projects.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Roman, any question?
Yeah, Brad, the project going on now that is applying for this or interested in this brownfield has already been given an abatement by the township. It was our first tax abatement. I believe it was a Public Act 210. So we've actually had to create 2 additional tax rolls to mechanically handle that abatement. It's my understanding that we would be using your brownfield designation. And one of the questions I had was, will we actually have to create additional tax rolls if we approve this brownfield?
Not to my knowledge, no. I mean, if you use Oakland County's BRA, we'll have a small admin fee built in per year basis, but I don't foresee, I mean, we just capture, the authorities just captures whatever tax rolls are already established.
Okay. So this project going on right now, they actually knew in advance that there was previous contamination. Is it odd that they're coming now looking for the brownfield, or does this typically happen this way?
I would say it typically happens. Ideally, it doesn't happen, obviously. Just because you know it's contaminated doesn't mean you know the full extent until you actually get in the ground. And that's when you run into problems. I've seen small gas station corners that thought it was a small cost, and it goes up to hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, really quickly. So it's not unusual.
And I would definitely like to address the board on that issue a little bit, why we're here 9 months later, so I can come into that when you're done with Brad.
Okay, that's all I have, Rick.
Another question. What's the rate of tax that you're trying to recover to recoup?
It's the full increased value. So when the plan gets established, there's a base value that's already established. So that base value, those taxes will still be going to the taxes, the mills they're already going to.
Right.
It's just that increased value that's captured.
So there's no loss on the current.
Correct. There's no loss on the current.
So very similar to the PA 210. There's no loss to the current revenue stream.
And Brad, you and I spoke about this briefly, but just to clarify, this would begin the capture once the PA 210 expires, which I think we're 7 years away from. It was an 8-year approval. There's 7 more years in the PA 210. Is that
Yeah, I mean, typically projects where there's abatements, either 198 or 210, it's basically just layered into the Brownfield tip table, so that may extend the Brownfield tip table, depending on it's a full, 100% capture of the taxes or however it's structured at the township. So yeah, it would just, it's layered in, it would just probably extend the payback period.
Is it determined to be a specific number of years, or can we cap the number of years that we allow it?
You can cap it if you would like, yeah, as far as how many. Yeah, we've seen that before in the city of Pontiac has capped years.
Okay. Thank you.
Or dollar amount is more generally what we see.
Okay, Mr. Powell?
One of the major issues that came before us when we agreed to the tax abatement was to assist the developer to create the development and to clean up the site. So we allowed for 7 years of us abating the taxes. It almost seems like double dipping. We've given 7 years tax abatement, and now they'd like to have up to another 30 years on top of that, besides what we've already given them. And so I'm questioning how that is or isn't maybe double dipping. We've almost given them money up front by delaying the taxes, and now we're going to delay them again.
I guess the way I would put it, I don't think it's double dip. I mean, we've done these type of projects before. You don't know the extent of the contamination, like I said before, until you get in the ground. So yeah, there's money up front that, with the abatement that was given, but you get in the ground and you run into some issues, and all of a sudden that money's dried up, and you're left there without any financing, and you have a lot of stuff left to do. And so it's like I said, I've seen a lot of projects that layer. A lot of projects don't happen unless you layer different incentives into it. So I would just say it's layering. I wouldn't classify it as double dipping.
So the abatement already given is subtracted from the amount that they can recover?
Yes, it's valid for the first 7 years. I mean, they're.
I think mechanically, we need to do some homework.
Yeah.
And I'll be the person responsible for doing it. And I guess my plan would be to bring back to the board some numbers so that we can all really see
Relate the numbers.
the
to
money
it.
effect.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. All right. Any other questions from the board? Mr. Clerk?
Rick, we've known for a number of years that there's been contamination on that site. Is there any guarantee, or I know it's tough to guarantee contamination, but how far in extent that the contamination would, and how long before it was totally cleaned up? I mean, is that the goal, to eliminate it? Or just try to do the best you can to clean up what you can?
Randy, do you want to interject here?
Yeah, Thank you again for giving us opportunity to present this to you. So here's what's happened in 9 months. When the site was originally looked at and done, we had a BEA, we had sampling, we had everything. Everyone knew that on the southern portion of the property that there were essentially two sources. Okay, and the one source was a gas station, and the second source was the dry cleaner that was on the south side of the street. And then the BA and everything. So based upon that, we actually took, and we came to you, and we were granted and we went through planning commission and everything, and it was agreed that we would take all the utilities down the center of the property for the purposes of staying out of the contamination. So approximately 3.5 months, 4 months ago, because of the contamination, DEQ, when they issued the water permit, they put a stipulation that they wanted a gasket used. Based upon that gasket, the fact that they wanted the gasket, they said in their responses, you need to go out and delineate that where your utilities are going through are clean, which everyone believed they were clean on every sample that had been done, every historic known fact. So they said, go do that. So we said, okay, fine. We had a big meeting. Mr. Colwall and other representatives from White Lake were with us at that meeting with DEQ, along with about 6 members from the DEQ. So when we started taking these samples, we hired PM Environmental to come in because that's their specialty, soil management, everything else. They are essentially the people that are the experts across the board. Okay, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. Well, what we find out is that in the BEA, everything everyone knew, it had been missed. It doesn't matter who missed it. Whoever we hired missed it, that there had also been a dry cleaner in one of the back buildings of the retail. So what they did, what we did is once we found that, the PM Environmental said, look, let's go in and let's do some testing. And we knew where the septic field was. Remember, there's septic, there's no sewer. Well, where does everything from a dry cleaner go? It goes to the septic. And that's where we got the hit. We got this hit that nobody expected. And now we're sitting there with the situation that we have all the utilities going right through the hot zone. We are talking about, we did everything we could to avoid having to have any soils management with your help, and we were grateful for it. And now we're stuck. We have a site plan that's putting everything through the hot zone. The hot zone has been delineated down to about 100 foot by 100 foot area, but they can speak more to it. Okay, we have spent, in the last 60 days, we spent about $38,000 doing borings, trying to determine all the hot zones and to determine the heights. In other words, if you have the septic field and trying to look, we've done groundwater sampling. It's really extensive. It's all been submitted to DEQ to try to deal with the soil management plan as well as a due care plan. In that regard, we're just devastated. We're at a position, the site has now been, you see there's nothing going on. Okay, we've lost one lease, and we are in a position now that we agreed with DEQ that we would put a vapor barrier under the entire 10,000 square foot building because it is close to the hot zone. So we want to make sure that's the original estimates are anywhere from $74,000 to $115,000, which is costing essentially a 15% cost overrun on that building. And we have some real serious problems with respect to a dry cleaner puts out a PCE. It'll be explained. The problem with the PCE is that it has to go to a special landfill. And the costs are insane. And the amount and quantity could possibly be insane. We have talked to the water department. We're going to be able to, without redesigning the entire site plan, we're going to be able to bring some of the water in to the building by avoiding that hot zone and save disturbing some of that hot zone. And just so you know, the hot zone is essentially, in most places, 11 foot down. So the footings don't affect it, nothing gets into it, but Wadi Boulevard and the fact that we have to pull close to 7 to 8 foot out of Wadi Boulevard means that we're just going to be pulling it out. And when we pull it out, yes, it will be taken off. Now, I'm going to let PM speak to it. There's been one of the things that even 3 years ago, if we had some of these results, they would have been non-significant. Because remember, this is 1948, is what happened. My understanding, and I'm going to again let Mike Kalka explain it to you, is that there's new rules and regulations. We don't know how much Flint has to do with it, but the samples where you could have so many parts per thousand have they've been cut down dramatically, maybe 100% fold. So if you used to be able to have 5,000 parts, now it's 60 parts. So the numbers we're getting are not significant, except that they're now significant under the laws that are coming. And even though those laws may not necessarily affect us today, we don't want to be in a situation where, and Mike can explain to it that if all of a sudden you get vapors down the road, you could have a site that is contaminated, or it's just something we didn't expect. So this isn't something that anyone knew about. This isn't, we're not coming back crying wolf when something was known. We did all of our due diligence. Nobody would ever put every utility going right through the hot zone. And this, I mean, we're talking about well over $500,000, well over half. So it might be a situation where we have to come back and we have to look at moving all those utilities out of Waddy Boulevard. But we don't know where we put them. We'd have to put them all the way to the back of the property. We really don't know. We're shut down. We don't want to lose another lease. Everyone knows that we have the Taco Bell lease, and that's driving the project. So we're trying to say, look, if we just pony up, we throw another $500,000 at it, we get this thing done, and we know in the long run we survive. Everyone survives, and if we're spending that $500,000, yes, dirt's coming out. Dirt is contaminated, dirt is going out. And it is a good long-term solution for the lake because the water samples, 20 foot, 25 foot down, which is unrelated to our building, we'll never get into that part of the water table, are coming up with the PCEs. They're coming up with the PCEs. So if we get it out of there, that's less likelihood that over the next 100 years it'll continue to migrate down into the water. So and I know that you may not be able to act on it today, but our biggest problem is this, is that we're looking at 90 days away from getting the state on board in a best case scenario. And Brad may be able to speak to that. If we had a resolution today, could we even get the state on board in 90 days? Would it be more like 120?
It's hard to say, probably closer to 120.
Probably closer to 120, which means that we're going to be holding up every part of construction as we can because, like you said, the state incremental tax financing is huge. Remember, the 210 does not cover the state. It does not affect school taxes. So that would give us the ability to start recovering some of that now, as opposed to having to wait until 7 years out. So I've spoken enough. I'm going to introduce Mike, and you can ask him your technical questions.
Thank you, Randy, and it's Kulka, not Kelka.
Oh, sorry.
You know,
I've known him for about 5 years, so.
when we first got brought into this project, well, first of all, I'm Mike Kulka. I'm engineer, principal, founder of PM Environmental, and I've been working in this profession for close to 30 years. And when they first came to us, you know, we had suggested going after Brownfield, and at the time they had mentioned that they had the tax abatement. And, you know, it's our job, and that's what Elizabeth, my associate here, does, is we look for incentives to help offset costs. But at that time, what we knew wasn't significant enough that it made sense, and the abatement was already offered. So to answer your question about double dipping, that's kind of, that does come up, and I don't like it to be perceived that way because things did surface. This was kind of the, all the stars aligned for a blast of lightning that wasn't planned for. So the first thing was that, and no harm doing by the consultant that did the prior work. From what their report stated for their due care provisions, there really wasn't any soil management issues, you know, but for the fact that this dry cleaner was missed, that's what sparked. And was it you that was at the DEQ meeting, or someone? I thought. Oh, you are. So I don't know if you recall the DEQ even brought up the issue of vapors, and so the vapor issue is what Randy was speaking to earlier. And I brought some of these handouts. One of them, we all keep hearing about the news. Well, this is some real news, not fake news. That's been Franklin Village was just on the news a week ago that they closed down a whole strip mall for this it's a dry cleaner, and they found a drum, and because of that and residual soils, they evacuated the entire strip center. So this is the type of thing, and I have 2 other articles of recent times that I can send to you that are all within the last year, that these vapor regulations that went into effect August of last year are literally, I used to be able to leave 100,000 times more contaminants than what is permissible today. So this discussion we're having with you today, you'll probably have more in the future, whether it's for Brownfield or not, whether it's for your own facilities or not. I mean, this is a new emerging issue that is getting more press, but for right now, the DEQ kind of lets us be the messenger. So at the meeting, we brought up some of these issues. That figure I'm providing to you is to answer your question, Terry, about the extent of this. So when we came in, we were kind of the grim reaper to say we got to evaluate this and we got to manage these soils because of the residual impacts. It does have to be treated as hazardous, which adds another 8 to 9-fold on tipping fees at a landfill and trucking costs and excavation. So that's where a lot of this cost came from. There's a large land balancing component of this property where we're changing grade. If this was a large Racer Trust old GM site, we can simply move it to another contaminated area, but those little circles and dots on that map are showing you how we have to surgically remove this, and we can't place it in an area that is now clean, so we can only remove what is contaminated. So those are the things that really have come to head in the last 4 months, and I again suggested doing this, and this is largely me asking for this, but I mean, at the point the costs have got so astronomical, it's kind of, they've been shooting the messenger, but this is the only solution that I know of that can kind of help soften this blow due to some variables that changed significantly in the last 6 months. I mean, August is not that long ago. So I don't know if that's a lot of a mouthful or if that's too much or too little.
I just like to rephrase my question there, and guarantee probably wasn't a good word to use, but what the extent of what you've done already, is there some assurance that the contamination can be all removed?
The intent of that scope was to quantify, is it 10 feet over, is it 20 feet over? So our plan would be to remove the areas noted so that, and then subsequently we would put a vapor barrier in the one commercial building. We have some contingencies for other buildings depending upon what any further sampling shows. And this was done as a request of the DEQ for the water permit as well. So as Randy commented on the Flint thing, the Flint water people at the DEQ are worried about the water distribution line, which is the gasket requirements, whereas we're advising on the soil management components of environmental regulation. We have a number of different umbrellas we fall under.
Is the urgency of this particular area different than the area that was proposed to be a restaurant? Are we talking about this now because it's closer to the surface than?
It's not an issue of restaurant or commercial or a FedEx place to drop off a package. It's a matter of these vapor criteria, which are simply residential and non-residential criteria. That's what's really driving it. And the fact that once something has these chemicals in it, there's a rule called the drive from rule that you have to manage it as a hazardous waste, which the slide that Brad showed at the gas station, petroleum compounds are exempt from this law. So we only, we were able to do a little bit of soil removal there for under 100,000 plus a number of other things because it was not hazardous. Because this is a drive from waste and it is regulated as hazardous, that puts us in this higher cost to get rid of contaminated soil.
When I mentioned the restaurant, I think most of the board all knew that, or at least we felt we knew that most of the contamination was in that proposed restaurant area. Is that deeper than what?
Most of the soil we're talking about is shallow soil, so it's in the top 5 feet.
But are we going to run to a situation later in the restaurant area or proposed restaurant
No,
area?
because I'm only showing you the depth from 0 to 5 feet. We also profiled from 5 to 10 and 10 to 15. So, and that soil doesn't necessarily have to be removed for safety of the occupants. It has to be removed because it's a hazardous waste and we have to change grade and we have nowhere else to put it. It's a land balancing issue.
Once you disturb it, you've got to move it.
Correct.
Right.
I think we've all known for a number of years that the contamination has affected a lot of the businesses in that area over there, and certainly to leave any of it in the ground if we can get it removed is a plus for the township. I'd hate to see that just left there, but
whoever operated that dry cleaner is
the
long
extent of
gone.
what we had.
I don't think it's even been there for 25 years or more.
That's a very old building, and unfortunately, back in that time, people weren't cognizant of what the long-term effect would be. And you've got chlorinated contaminants there. They're highly, highly volatile. I know that there's so many chemicals here that I have to be a chemist to read the list, but it is and has the possibility of being a toxic cocktail.
Right. I mean, this development is a victim of 2 defunct dry cleaners from decades ago.
And I did see that story on that building in Franklin that was closed. So
Yeah, and I mean that's what they're. I mean, I kind of don't like to see them doing that, but it does show the magnitude of how they're enforcing this. In my career, all we've ever dealt with is Department of Environmental Quality, and now Health and Human Services is getting involved with these because they look at these vapors as a real safety risk. So feel safe.
Well, to answer your question, Randy, I think that the board needs to do a little bit of homework. I don't think anybody's prepared to pass any kind of resolution tonight. We need to know the impact. We need to know some more information that will reach out to you and to you to see what will help us kind of put this together and see what the results would be. Does any of the other board members have questions? Mr. Powell.
Brad, maybe you can help me on this, and I just thought I'd lay it out there. Let's just assume that the developer has his abatement, which we've already given him, and then does the brownfield, it complies with the brownfield. He gets his building up, and 10 years from now, he is getting some profits from his investment. In theory, the township would be not capturing funds because of the TIF for another 20 years, and yet they will be pocketing profit from their development. And so I'm wondering how the two dovetail together to maybe be a little bit more fair to the people of White Lake.
I mean, that's a question, really. I mean, Brad and I present a lot of these. Brownfield incentives are intended. Public Act 381 is intended to offset legacy costs that need to be dealt with to redevelop a property. We don't often tie. There used to be the old brownfield credits that they had this but-for rule. They said, but for the credit, this would never happen. And this, the way we present it and the way the law reads, it's simply a mechanism to recover costs for costs that no one in this room should have to incur. But if someone doesn't, this is going to sit there as a blighted property.
That's true.
Can I ask a question on this? We, at this point, have 4 separate parcels. Okay, Wadi Boulevard is actually on one of the parcels. If we were to say, let's just affect the one that Wadi Boulevard has, even though it's going to cost us on the building, if we were to do something like that as a compromise with White Lake, is that doable, Brad? Can we can essentially say, let's allow the TIF to only apply to 2 of the parcels where it really affects, and it wouldn't apply to the Taco Bell, which is clean, and it might not apply to another. Would we be able to do that?
You could do that. You can identify whatever you wish in your brownfield plan as far as parcels of land.
And this would be part of this information that we would be reaching out for and gathering.
And I did. That was not rhetorical. I did not know the answer to that. I had hoped I was going to get that answer. But, so there would be room so that you feel like you are protecting your community with respect to increasing your tax base on this.
Correct.
And allowing us to take it against a couple of properties that are suffering the significant impact.
I don't know that even works, Randy. I think your goal is to recover the costs that it takes you to clean this up. So whether it's 1 parcel, 2, 3, or 4, isn't your goal to recover those costs?
Yeah, but if we can go 30 years out.
He's just saying it gets you some of the money quicker than waiting until they're fully paid off.
Because at 7 years, we would still have 23 years left on those other 2 parcels to collect it. But at 7 years, the Taco Bell site, which is going to be 10 times the value it is, and the restaurant that's going to be 10 times the value. So at that 7-year period, you would still have 2 parcels where you would be getting all your value, and
You got full return at that
and it
point.
would help out with. I think we could work something out like that.
We need to have some conversation.
And I just want to point out, Elizabeth, their rough numbers that they ran so far would be roughly a 15-year payback period, not a full 30. So those are rough numbers to start off with, so it wouldn't be a full 30-year.
Was that calculated on the property as an entirety?
That's the four parcels currently, correct.
So then it's just horse trading. More years here, you get the money sooner. It's.
Okay. I'd like
If you
to
guys
thank-
need any, if you want, I can email you any
Yeah.
of the backup documentation.
Yeah,
for
we'd
that.
like that. If you could send it to,
Sure.
to us, we'd appreciate it. Sean, you want to take that information into the planning department, and then we'll disseminate it from there?
Absolutely, and Mike knows how to find us.
Okay, so if you can do that, direct it to Mr. O'Neill. Thank you for coming and doing your presentation. Randy, thank you for coming
Randy,
down.
thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sean, do you need one of these?
Just when you thought it was safe to drink?
Yeah, I would like that.
Okay. Moving on to item 8, the minutes, approval of minutes for the February 20th, 2018. Any question on the minutes?
Supervisor?
Yes, sir.
On page 5, I just turned to my colleagues and asked their opinion on this. On page 5, item H, it essentially just says request for general fund transfer, and it was moved to approve the general fund transfer of $100,000. It doesn't state why, how come, and I thought it might be a good idea for posterity, somebody going through the minutes, to have at least some idea why we transferred $100,000.
Yeah, I'm surprised that didn't quite in there, to be honest with you.
I believe it's for the sewer fund,
Just for the sewer fund.
pay of the balance of the phase 1, correct?
Final payment in the phase 1 sewer bond, correct?
We'll add that.
Yep.
Okay, so I,
For final payment on phase 1,
sewer
sewer fund.
bonds, right.
Get that, Amy? Anything else? Looking for a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Motion to approve the minutes is amended. Looking for support.
Support?
A motion support. All in favor? Aye. Ayes have it. Moving on to the next item, which would be the approval of minutes of the special board meeting of February 26, 2018.
So, Mr. Supervisor, I believe that Mike Powell left a little bit early, and that doesn't reflect. I believe he left before we went back into public session.
Good point. That's exactly what
That is
happened.
correct. I don't recall exactly what time. Mr. Powell?
Well, it was prior to us going back into public session, and that's probably the appropriate place to put it.
Right.
Okay.
So we would have to amend his vote because I don't believe he was present.
Yeah, the last 2 items, it would have only been passed by 6 and not by 7, correct?
Correct. I believe we can put down there, after that footnote, if you want to, that 6 vote due to trustee Powell leaving the meeting prior to conclusion.
Correct.
Got it, Amy? Good? Okay. Okay, looking for a motion of, looking for a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion to approve as amended?
As amended.
Okay.
Support?
Support? Motion support, all in favor? Aye. Ayes have it. Okay. Mr. Bonnevier, we have a public hearing, a show cause hearing for dangerous building.
Yes, sir. The building department identified 6 properties out on Gale Island that considered dangerous. A public hearing was held on November 29th of last year. The hearing officer rendered a decision to have the 6 properties demolished and the property cleaned up and restored. As of today's date, all 6 properties are in violation of the hearing officer's findings and recommendations. And we're in front of the board tonight to either hear from the property owners to have them show cause why the properties shouldn't be moved forward and the township seek to have them demolished. And that's what brings us here tonight.
Okay.
One of the properties out there,
Can you identify the property?
it's listed as 8531 Gale Road. Owner David and Peggy Allen. That property owner has started with some of the cleanup. He is in violation of the hearing officer's motion or findings that required the property to be cleaned up by January 31st of this year. From some of the property owners around there, he's cleaned up about 75% of the property. It would be the building department's decision and my decision to grant that property owner more time to, get the property cleaned up on his own. The other 5 properties, I recommend that the Township Board make a motion to allow us to secure bids to get those properties abated and cleaned up.
Yeah, a little tough to clean up on an island in the wintertime.
It was tough posting them too.
Dry skates on. Any questions from the board? Mr. Powell?
Just to let the board know, to make sure that you're aware here, I'm the dangerous building a hearing officer in Commerce Township. So I just want to make sure there's no conflict of interest, but I have some intimacy in these processes. And one of the issues that always concerns me is the length of time that neighbors and other residents have to put up with the cleanup process. And so we'll deal with the other ones first. I highly suggest that the building department or we put a time limit on, once the cleanup starts, that it be done in 30 days instead of carrying out an entire summer. That being said, you had said, let's give, I forget the people said, Mr. Allen, a little more time. He's had 2 months longer than what the dangerous building hearing officer had already stated. How much time are you suggesting we give him?
He has approached me on several occasions, and as far as all the property, he's the only one that has approached the building department with a restoration plan. He started on it as soon as he received our first notices of violation. Due to the weather and due to it being out on an island, it's kind of held him back a little bit. He has told me that his plan was to have it completed this spring. The neighbors around him are even willing to grant him more time as long as he continues moving forward on it.
Okay, because he had asked through September, and I felt that was probably a little bit too long. So if we could put a date on it this spring, certainly he's shown willingness to at least step up to his problem. So, okay.
Knowing the history of that island and knowing the nature of some of the issues there, and again, the logistical difficulties.
Sure.
I really don't personally have a problem granting him until September, especially if his neighbors have come forth and shown that an interest to you, obviously, that they agree that he's making an effort to go forward, and he's immediately responded to your letters of complaint and concern. So I think if he's making an earnest effort forward, I think we need to, take into consideration, give him as much time as we feel necessary. And I would like to put that back on Brent to see what his thought process is.
Well, the same neighbors that are willing to grant him more time are the same neighbors that originally approached my department, with the blight concerns. And they seem to be, satisfied in his effort so far. I don't know if it makes a difference to the board, but the gentleman is 70 years old and he is a retired veteran of the armed forces. And he has extended numerous calls to me and has updated me on his progress. And his biggest issue was with the thaw freeze, especially this winter. As soon as the lake was kind of safe to drive trucks on, it got warm for a few days over January, and he's had trouble getting it out of there. So far, he's been a man of his word, and I would hope the board would maybe extend a courtesy to him.
My only concern is I know myself that if I'm given 6 months to clean something up, it typically takes 1 day less than 6 months. If I'm given 3 months, it happens in that 3-month period. So I don't have any problem using your discretion on that, but certainly those that we're going to award something on, we ought to put in the advertisement that it should be done in a 30-day period once they start. If we're gonna pay somebody to do it, we ought to have them do it.
You're referring to the removal.
The removal, that is correct.
Okay, I just want to separate the removal from the continued restoration of
that is
the other
correct.
group. Okay.
So the purpose of this hearing is a show cause hearing, to give the owners an opportunity to show cause why you shouldn't affirm the order of the hearings officer. So after you've given every owner an opportunity to be heard, then you would either affirm or prove what the hearing officer's order was. You can modify it, or you can decline to follow his opinion. I will note, in Mike Powell, I think this might address your concern, is if the order is approved or modified, then the owner has to comply with the order within 21 days after this hearing. There is a provision, though, that says the 21-day period may be extended at the discretion of the township supervisor or township building official if that individual in his sole discretion determines that the owner is proceeding in good faith to comply with the terms of the order. So I'd recommend actually you take whatever motions or plan you take it one by one for each of these parcels to ensure everybody has an opportunity to be heard on their individual parcel, and you're clear on your direction on all of them.
Very good, okay.
I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Ruggles.
I agree with what your point there, Mike, about the 30 days. I just wonder if, because they're on an island, maybe 60 is more appropriate, given the...
And absolutely, I totally understand. Yes.
Any other questions?
We can start at the top of my list and go down and
We can start at the top of your list. However, I see that you have the same landowner for multiple parcels.
can we do 5, Lisa, or
Make
with
one
the same
request.
landowner, or do you want to do one at a time?
That's fine, just I would call out each parcel number and each owner.
Okay. The first one doesn't have an address, parcel number 12-13-128-008, owner Stephen Franklin. Stephen Franklin's also the property of the next one, 12-13-128-012, known as 2525 Gale Island. Stephen Franklin is also the owner of property known as parcel number ID 12-13-128-016, known as 2349 Gale Island. Mr. Stephen Franklin is also the owner of parcel ID number 12-13-128-020, known as 2335 Gale Island. And Mr. Stephen Franklin is the owner of 12-13-202-012, known as 2355 Gale Island. Mr. Franklin, our representative, Mr. Franklin here to give testimony.
Going once, going twice. Mr. Franklin, nor representative appears to be present. Okay. Yes?
Well, someone's gonna wanna make a
Wanna make a
motion.
Okay. When you're looking for a motion to proceed with the recommendation from the building department to secure 3 bids for the demolition of the properties aforementioned.
Mr. Supervisor, I move that we affirm the findings of the hearing officer for the 5 parcels that were discussed at the public hearing owned by Stephen Franklin, and that we request the building department to immediately obtain 3 contractors to demolish and remove the demolition from the island within a 60-day period once they're started.
Thank you. We have a motion. Looking for motion and support by Andrea. Roll call vote. So, no.
Technically, the way the statute's written is, you would affirm the opinion of the hearing officer, and then give the owner 21 days to comply with the order and then,
All right,
That's
so
why we
obviously
have-
modify my, I think I said that, but yes, that's correct. Yes.
Okay, so I have a motion from Mr. Powell. I have support from Andrea. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you. Your other parcel?
The last one is owned by David and Peggy Allen. The property parcel ID number is 12-13-128-022, known as 8531 Gale Road. I don't know if anyone's here representing Mr. Allen. I spoke to him. He told me he would not be in attendance tonight.
But you've had conversation with him? and
Yes, I have.
Any satisfaction, to your satisfaction so far, everything's been
He's
going forward?
He's been moving forward with the cleanup, not only to my satisfaction, but also to the neighbors that were the original complainants on
Very good.
the site.
Mr. Roman, you have a question?
Hey, Brent, this says that this gentleman, this owner is retired, and has limited income. Just curious, what's the nature of the work that remains? You said 75% of it has been done?
75% of the property's been cleaned up. A good portion of the structure has been removed. I would say that there's probably 50% of the structure itself needs to be removed yet, which
Okay.
is an old, kind of like dilapidated cottage.
What's a tear down? It's a tear down anyway, you're saying?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so we're looking for a motion to grant him an extension?
oh, you would either approve, modify,
Modify.
or
We
decline
will
to follow the
modify.
opinion of the hearing officer.
That's right.
And if you do approve the opinion or affirm the opinion, then the owner would have 21 days to comply with the order unless in the discretion of Brent or you, and you feel he's been progressing, you can extend that time.
Would you like to have that discretion, Brent? I would like to bestow that upon you. You are the building official.
I would not mind to track him, and if at some point we reach a dead end, to bring it back to your attention for further action,
Okay,
if need be.
so we can affirm the findings of the, you're good at this.
Well, okay, Mr. Supervisor, I move that we affirm the finding of the hearing officer, but modify the order allowing the Allens, the owners of the property, enough time to clean up their property at the discretion of the building official.
I have a motion, looking for support. Support. Support from Mr. Ruggles, a motion, support, all in favor?
Aye.
Let's have it, thank you. Thank you very much.
I do have one question for the board. Once I receive the demolition bids and proposals, do I come back in front of the board, or is the board granting the supervisor the ability to get one to kind of like expedite this and keep this moving, or does the board want to see it?
The ordinance dictates.
Yes.
That it comes back here, right?
No,
Oh,
No.
okay. Good.
It can go to me.
so the ordinance talks about the 21-day period. So if the board affirms, which they have, the owner has 21 days to comply. You can extend that at your discretion if there's progress moving forward. But in the case of any order of demolition, and if they fail to apply for a demolition permit and remove the structure and all debris within 30 days of the date of this hearing, the township board or its agents or contractors may enter onto the property and take all necessary actions to implement the order, including actual demolition and removal of debris.
I just didn't know, since it was modified, if that had to be included as part of the,
Who does he award the contract to if he has 3 bidders? Do we author, does the ordinance specifically say to use the lowest bidder?
It does not.
Okay, so,
I'll take the discretion.
okay, I'm good with that.
Thank
Rick,
you.
you said you're going to give him discretion. I just didn't hear you when you turned your head.
I'm sorry.
I couldn't hear you when you turned your head.
Oh, I beg your pardon, Liz. clear, it does not state specifically what the protocol is, so I'll take the discretion to award the bids. Internally, in-house officials will look at the bids,
Okay, thank you.
see what is to be said. Okay, very good. That brings us up to the hearing for the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund.
Okay, this is sort of two parts. The first part, as some of you know, is to hold a public hearing, and there's a brief presentation, which is better given by Jason, but I will try to fill in for him the best as to the best of my ability. And then a resolution follows the public hearing. So the property, of course, that we're discussing, which is a part of the packet item, the resolution item, which actually I'm going to get this out. There's a small amendment that we'll get to when we get to the resolution. This involves the Brenda Lake Campground property, which you can see here in an aerial photograph. The trust fund grant process is one that's been around for approximately 40 years, and this video, if you'll indulge me about 5 minutes, I think is very helpful, not only for the board members to see, and many of you are familiar with this process because this isn't our first application to the trust fund, but I think the public would possibly benefit from knowing more about the process and the trust fund as well.
Better or worse?
Good, thank you. Sir, what is your name? Just speaking.
Sean O'Neill?
Yeah, that'd be a public hearing.
The Natural Resources Trust Fund was one of those great ideas that comes about, maybe every generation or two, and it came about in the mid-70s.
The Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund was a statute passed by the legislature to provide funding for the purchase of recreational properties, state lands, local communities, and it was set aside as a pot of money that was protected, which came from oil and gas revenues from state-owned minerals.
All of a sudden, gas and oil prices were shooting up, and somebody said, we're going to be flush with a lot of cash here that's going to go into the state coffers. What do we do with it?
When we were planning for the development of oil and gas in the Pigeon River, I just thought there might be a way in which we could kind of give back to public lands as a result of the development on the Pigeon River. And that was an opportunity to try to reduce the impacts from the oil and gas development, which was very controversial at the time.
The story of the trust fund is really an interesting one. There was a huge controversy over the idea of permitting oil and gas development in the Pigeon River country of Michigan, which is up in the northeast corner of the lower peninsula of the state. The resources that were there, the oil and gas, were owned by the people of the state of Michigan. The oil and gas that was under the ground in the Pigeon River Country State Forest.
You had people that wanted to drill for oil and natural gas on state lands in Michigan. And you had people that were completely opposed to that concept of drilling for oil and gas on state lands in Michigan. Then you had people coming forth with ways to kind of bridge that compromise, and the compromise was the Natural Resources Trust Fund.
Some people in the Department of Natural Resources and the governor's office and the Michigan United Conservation Clubs got together and said, how do we do something that enables the development to occur at the same time that we do something for future generations? The concept behind it was you take the proceeds you get from non-renewable resources, things that can't be replaced, oil and gas and other minerals that are under the ground that are owned by the people of the state of Michigan. Take the proceeds from the use of those resources and put them in a fund that can only be used to buy additional non-renewable resources, land, development projects for recreation.
Now, each year, we're going to be able to use a third of those dollars. And we'll put a board in place, a 5-member board in place, that will choose the project and send those on to the legislature. Every county has seen a project. Every county has seen at least one project, and every county And most cities have benefited from the Natural Resources Trust Fund.
Over $1 billion that wouldn't have otherwise been there now go into all of these communities. These communities are smart. They are using this money to change their destinies as communities.
We would hear from over 100 applicants many years, cities, counties, townships, villages that wanted to put in a park.
There have been a number of projects that have really made huge differences across the state of Michigan. The ones that come to mind immediately are Milliken State Park on the Detroit River.
In the city of Detroit on Belle Isle, the Glow Building.
That sparked a huge change in that riverfront in Detroit to where it is today, a beautiful riverfront.
The sand dunes that now people can recreate on.
Even up in the tip of the Keweenaw, a trail system that they created through the Keweenaw with help from the trust fund. The Pigeon River Country State Forest is one of the most amazing. That is where the idea of the trust fund originally came from.
Development projects for recreation.
It's not a single iconic project, it's the fact that you can go anywhere on the Great Lakes and have access to them thanks to the Natural Resources Trust Fund.
An enormous number of projects that have benefited local communities and have benefited people of the entire state.
People recreate on this land. They spend dollars as a result, whether they hunt, fish, pick mushrooms on the Pigeon River, ride horses. Anywhere there are recreational lands that results in dollars for not only the state, but for the local economy as well. So it's had a major impact.
No place else in the country ever tried anything like this, and it's proven to be extremely successful.
The trust fund and the fact that it was built on this unique collaboration, this unique compromise, is the type of innovation that we want to continue to see here in the state of Michigan and that the rest of the country should be looking at.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill.
All right, that was far more interesting than anything I could probably say on this topic tonight. So, as I mentioned before the video, this application to the trust fund would not be our first. Vetter Park, which is most of the audience and all the board members would be familiar with, back in 1999 received funds to develop the park for walking paths, ball fields, shelter, and play structure. And Bloomer Park 10 years later, almost 10 years ago, once that property was purchased from the state of Michigan, it's also a lakefront parcel. I think $350,000 of state resources were put into that project through the trust fund grant. So those are both development projects. This would be an acquisition through the same trust fund with the idea of potentially going in the future for a development grant similar to the ones we've received previously. So all very interesting, and as I mentioned, every county has seen a project and our township's seen 2 already. So the Pollock property, which is where we also call the Brenda Lake Campground, has been in our recreation master plan on an acquisition list for almost 10 years now. In 2009, that master plan update located it among many other parcels as potential future acquisitions. This is just a page from the recreation plan that you can find online that talks a little bit about the project and the acquisition over a period of a few years. This is an aerial of the property as it sits today. Those yellow lines are parcel lines. So those numbers that we're lighting up right there constitute approximately 57 acres of land. And you can see there are almost roughly 550 feet of lake frontage on Brenda Lake. I'm going to use the pointer if it'll function. So this is the frontage that most people who are on the lake now would see on this campground property. And here's Mud Lake further south. That's all very high quality wetland and would not be, probably permitted to be disturbed, nor would it be our recommendation to disturb property further south. So future development goals could include some of the things that are shown here, which would be a pathway to connect to a future civic center, which would include township and library facilities, non-motorized boat access. We received many calls in our office over the last week or two, and most of those calls really pertain to our goals for future access, and it was communicated to those folks that our plan does not include power boating in the future. Our plan includes stand-up paddleboarding, kayaking, canoeing, passive use of that shoreline and that park, as opposed to what it is used for today, which is a private access point for anyone to launch their power boat at that location. And also play structures and pavilions would be something that we would foresee being developed in the future. And again, as I mentioned, you can see, where did my arrow go? Here it is. This area here would be part of that preservation, that's part of that mud lake system, which is a very high quality wetland.
There's a specific name, there's a certain type of wetland. What is that called? I was trying to remember that the other night, and I couldn't remember. Is it Mesozoic or something like
it's
that?
a conifer swamp, something like that.
Well, I was off a
and
mile.
it's actually one of the mud lake area is one of the highest quality systems of its kind in the entire county, and it's on.
Wasn't
an
it in
inventory list.
southeastern Michigan?
It may even extend. It's definitely near the top of the list probably in the state of Michigan, but at the top in Oakland County and potentially southeast Michigan, and kind of right in many people's backyard. So there are some acquisition requirements, which we're going through some of those today, but signed letter of intent, which we have, and the Six Rivers Land Conservancy, who's been involved in this process, has obtained between them and the seller. So there is a willingness to sell. Access to the public, which obviously kind of goes without saying. That is the goal here. Elimination of non-residential, non-recreational uses and structures, which would be a requirement. This process is a long process. It's going to take 1.5 to 2 years. The application, if made, is due April 1st, and it could take 1.5 to 2 years to actually get all the way through the process of being awarded the grant and then acquiring the land. And then being reimbursed by the state of Michigan. So it is a long process, but it could be a very fruitful process. I think I saw during the video a grant that was given for a building. It was $9 million. I mean, they're giving significant dollars away that would not otherwise be in our community. So it's certainly great if we're able to get these kinds of dollars. So, and then a phase 1 environmental assessment would have to be done. We don't foresee there being serious contamination issues, but we just talked about unforeseen contamination a few minutes ago, and so it is a requirement that we go through that as part of this process and identify any issues prior to moving forward with the state. There are going to be 2 appraisals necessary because the value of this property is in excess of $750,000. I think the dollar figure we're talking about is in the neighborhood of $1.85 million. And a 25% match is required in order to be eligible. Most who know a lot about this process would advise you to match 26 or 27% to get more points. Parks and Rec Fund, which has been long established, has the ability to add additional funds to a match, which would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $475,000 to $500,000, roughly. In order to bring the points up, in order to score better with the grant committee. And then incidental costs can be, you can be awarded grant funds to cover incidental costs like appraisals and environmental assessments, up to 5% of the cost of the property, which is significant and could become very helpful. So that's really it as far as the process, and I thought it was important to share some of that with all of you and with the audience. Someone had asked me my name. I apologize. My back is to you, and I didn't say who I was. My name is Sean O'Neill, and I am the planning director here at the Township. And Jason Michaelangeli, who's our senior planner, he and I work together, and he does most of the work related to Parks and Recreation, and he put the slideshow together and has been kind of leading this effort from our department and was unable to be here tonight. But if there's any questions anyone has, I'd be happy to answer them, or if I'm unable to answer them tonight, I'd be happy to get you that information tomorrow.
Okay. Any questions from the board for Jason? Jason. Sean.
I was just going to ask Sean if you could just briefly explain to the audience today a little bit about an additional grant for developing this property if we're fortunate enough to get it.
Yes, and I think Bloomer Park is probably the most recent example to use. In the case of Bloomer Park, we went through the same program. There's a acquisition grant and there's a development grant. So tonight we're talking about an acquisition of property, but if you own property, you're able to, so if we are able to purchase this, foreshadowing a few years, we're able to go back and ask the same fund for a development grant. And I believe it was a 33% match that we made at Bloomer Park. I think $350,000 came from the state and $175,000 came from the township to do a $525,000 project. So I really don't see us, we have been very successful over the years with leveraging some of these tax dollars to get the most bang for our buck in the case of Bloomer Park, in the case of several other parks and other projects around the township. So I would foresee, if we're successful in acquiring this land, I would foresee the Parks and Rec Committee recommending that we then apply for a development grant. As you saw, there are some plans in the works with specific ideas, but it's sort of premature at this point to start putting that plan together. Once this process is successful, we would then begin the process of asking for a development grant, which, again, could help us make great strides in bringing the eventual development project to fruition.
Okay. Anyone else with a question? Mr. Ruggles.
I have a question. Are you familiar at all with what the success rate of the applicants has been recently for this?
I believe last year I think every project was awarded.
Yeah.
And I can't speak to the year before that, but I recently, and it could have to do with the economics of it. I mean, communities weren't in a position possibly to match projects or acquisitions, but I can't say how many were sought last year for acquisitions, but I believe, and you may be able to speak to this, Andrea, if it came
that's
up.
exactly what I've heard
Okay.
also.
So they were all funded last year, every single one of them, though I don't know how many there were.
And we would know in December?
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
Mr. Powell.
I've got two questions, Sean. When you use the word development, most people think of houses, stores, subdivisions, and roads and things like that. When you say development of this piece, what are you referring to?
This slide here, when you talk about future development goals, and I think that's important, it's basically finishing the park. I mean, if anyone's been down there now, there's some camping, there's some storage of boats, and it's been in the condition it's in now for 40 years, 50 years, for a long while. But the future development goals that we speak of are pathways, trails through the property, a fishing platform or a viewing platform similar to the one that's at Bloomer Park, pavilions, things like that.
Trails,
Not,
public space improvements.
Yeah, possibly a restroom facility, things like that, but not, we're not going to build a bunch of structures, or it won't be development in the sense that someone will be building. It's limited. You have to build recreational type structures and facilities on this property.
The other question I had for you, and it seems to me it was back in 2006, something like that, a developer actually brought this property to the township for development of homes. And can you refresh my memory as to what that development included?
The shores of Brendel Lake, my hair wasn't as gray then and I had more of it, but it was about 2006, and I think it was in the neighborhood of 74, 76 houses, somewhere in the mid-70s. Single-family homes. The project got preliminary site plan approval. The property was rezoned, and what was controversial, and some of the folks who may be here tonight probably remember that well, but what became very emotional for the people who lived there, and understandably so, was that project had approval from the state of Michigan to continue to use the boat launch for the new residents and the docking facilities. They were able to fix them up, and it was going to become an enforcement issue for us as far as who was allowed to launch and when they were allowed to launch and who was allowed to keep their boat where. I mean, it was not something that I was personally looking forward to, and it was it didn't break my heart that project went away. I'll say it that way. But you know, that is, I don't know that a project like that would come back and necessarily get approved, but I think opportunities like this don't come around very often, and I think that, you know, if we don't preserve this now, certainly, like in any other property, you may miss the opportunity to control it. You know, and if you want to control what happens somewhere, you should own it, because that gives you the ultimate decision-making power. And you know, in this case, to have someone potentially give us 75% of the cost, 74% of the cost to purchase this, from where I sit, makes a decision a lot easier. You know, we don't have the funds to go and spend, you know, pay the freight on the entire cost of this property. But if we're able to get this, it would be a great thing for that lake, for the township's residents going forward, and for the preservation of the environment. I mean, this lake is got the Huron River running through it, and a pristine wetland system, and I think those are all really good reasons to consider this.
So this would preserve the shoreline and the wetlands and preclude the launching of any boats other than, at least as proposed, canoes, things that are hand launched.
We could control that because we will have the ability to set park rules, but you know, there's a launch there now. We wouldn't need that. There are docks there for shoring up boats long term. We wouldn't need that. I mean, we would, in the development process, probably seek to remove all of that and put something in its place that would suit the property's needs going forward. But yeah, it's more of a passive, I call it a passive use type park, where people have the ability to possibly go swimming, go fishing, paddle a canoe out there, but not launch jet skis or power boats, things like that. That's, I mean, that would be kind of how I would anticipate it going.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Roman?
I just wanted to say to the rest of the board real quick, kind of the way I've always looked at the land in the township is if you can trade existing land for better land, it's a win-win. That's effectively what we've done with the acreage that we bought on Elizabeth Lake Road. We sold 2 other properties to pay for about 75% of that land. I think eventually we're going to sell this piece here, and I think with that money, that would not only cover the cost of this 57 acres, but would cover the balance of the 26 acres that we bought on Elizabeth Lake Road. So I think in the long run, this makes great sense, and as Sean mentioned, they don't make any more land. Once in a lifetime opportunity, guys, to snag this piece. And beautiful piece.
Yeah, we have an opportunity to create an oasis, in a sense, within the center of our city. You know, we look at White Lake now as a somewhat, I call it a fringe community. And I remember driving down the road and I'd see the cows over Kelly's cornfield, and I remember feeding them once or twice from the side of the road. And today, you know, that's changed. Things have evolved. We've got the 59 corridor, which is fairly destined for commercial development and utilization. So when we have an opportunity to take a look at these little areas that we can take and save from further development and preserve it for the community for the future, we talk about it now, but maybe 10 years from now, 15 years now, 25 years from now, from our children and our grandchildren, we have the ability to walk through a larger tract of land, which at this point, if you added it all up, would probably be 80, 85 acres of area that would be the hub of that walkable community, which would give us an opportunity of which so many other communities would be so enviable of, because they just don't have this knocking on their door. It just happened to be a project. This property was almost in the hands of a developer here, another developer here just a very short time ago when I first started to talk about this land, and found out that there was something going on with it, and it was kind of moving in that direction. And that's what sent my bells and whistles off. And I went around and I met a bunch of different people, and I was able to hook up with Chris Brunch from the Six Rivers Conservancy, whose objective of that organization is to preserve these types of lands and lend any assistance to us in helping us arrange these agreements. And he made me aware of this trust fund, and I beat a path back here and got a hold of Sean and Jason and started getting on the phone and making calls and trying to see what we could do to see as to what level we could take this to. The interests of the persons that I've spoke with so far seem to be fairly interested in it, and the simple fact that the state is willing to pay for 74% of it. I don't know. If I was going to buy a car and somebody gave me a voucher for 74% off, I'd be pretty excited. You know, it's not a car, it's a piece of land, but it's something that each and every one of us as residents of this community will be able to have for the future and enjoy, and to preserve it in its natural state. And Mud Lake, as Sean said, is on the radar as a very sensitive wetland area. So we're going to be able to have an opportunity to help preserve that for perpetuity. And I think it's just something that we need to consider. Any other comments from the board?
Yeah, I just want to make, 'cause I'm the Parks and Rec liaison, and the slides were absolutely correct. This has been on our agenda, or our master plan for years. We generally like to have minimal stuff changed. If anyone's been to Bloomer Park, yes, we had to move some stuff, but that's a very minimalist park. We put a pavilion in, some pathways, and that's it. So we kind of all think that same thing about this acquisition.
How many acres is Bloomer Park?
23, 24 acres. And it's also waterfront park.
We're going to have a public comment area here in a few minutes, so we'll open that up in a minute. Any other questions from the board?
I'm looking forward to hearing from the public. Will we have an opportunity to speak afterwards?
That's what we're going to do here. Okay, so I'd like to take this time and make a motion to open up for public comment. Like to make a motion?
Public hearing.
Public hearing, I'm sorry.
I'll support your motion.
You support my motion for public hearing?
Yes.
Mr. Powell? Thank you very much. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. We are now open for public hearing. You will be asked to well, some of you are standing. Stand, identify yourself, and you can either ask a question, which we may or may not be able to answer in its entirety, but we would like to hear what you have to say. And the young lady in the back row.
Hi, my name is Justine Kelso. With the proposed transition of Brindle Lake going from public or from private to public, what would DNR place be at Brindle Lake with this proposed transition?
It's a township park. That's it.
Okay, so.
Done.
Okay.
It becomes township park. So some properties are purchased through the DNR trust fund for state purposes. This particular one is because of the fact that we, as a community, would be making a contribution to it. That's what pushes it into this category of now, and we receive a certain amount of points. It now becomes our park, our community park. We are the ones that control it. We don't have Lansing telling us what to do. Okay. I mean, there are certain criteria. One of the criteria, I believe, it has to remain a park forever.
That was just going to say that you're correct, and the other one is that there's certain signage that acknowledges the fact that it was purchased with trust fund dollars, and beyond that, we're able to make park rules and decide on how the park is used and developed going forward.
So we can't, after 10 years, have the park and say, we're tired of cutting the grass. We're going to sell it to J&J Development. I hope there's nobody from J&J Development in here. We can't do it by law, by statute. It is now a park forever and always for the people of White Lake Township. Period. Done. Any comment? Yes, sir. Stand, identify.
Scott Damon. So the letter, actually, I think it's a great idea, provided that it's not going to have powerboats access, but keeping that part of the lake pristine as a park, I think, is great. But the letter of intent, if it's going to take 1.5 to 2 years, can the current owner back out at any time during that?
The process can take up to that long, but the owner has agreed to go to the first round, and the first round is just this process. Our application is due April 1st, and once that is applied, they've agreed to do the first round, which will go through December. In December, it would be yay or nay, okay? If it's a yay, then there's other little dominoes that have to go into place through this process. And it might not be until the state legislature actually approves those funds through an act at the state to probably sometime in March or April. And shortly after that, we could close. The reason that they say up to 2 years is because if we could convince the owner to do possibly a second round of it, if we don't make the first round, we could possibly go through the second round. I made an inquiry with the gentleman from Six Rivers, and I asked him, I said, what's your thought process on this? This is what you do, okay? He says, do we stand a better than 50% chance in your mind's eye of getting this? And he said significantly higher because of the quality of the land and the areas that it touches. So there's no
I was gonna
guarantees.
say, there's nothing legally binding then with the current owner. So if somebody else, a developer, came in between that time and said, I'm gonna.
No, they are bound. They are bound to this agreement
Okay, all right.
between the time that they sold it until the time that the trust fund says yay or nay. If they in December said, nope, it's not going to happen, we as a board, if the public wanted us to, could do one of two things. A, go back to the owner and say, look, we would really like to try this one more time, okay? And we'd all come back here one more time again, okay? Or if our Parks and Rec millage goes through, which I'm hoping it will, that we're going to have up there, we could then possibly sit down and maybe go into a brokerage with a land contract purchase agreement with the property, but then we're paying the full tilt. The public, now we're paying for it. It just makes more sense to use the tool in the box that's available to us. And that way, as you saw by the video on the trust fund, that's what it's for. So let's try that approach and move forward with it. Okay. Any other questions? Somebody's got it. Yes, sir.
Chris Levens. Mud Lake, very popular with voters on the lake. With developing that area, do you foresee any restrictions going through the channel to Mud Lake?
No. There would be nothing that would be, I don't see how.
Well, I mean, if you put a fishing dock, that area's not very wide.
I don't think there would anything but be going there.
So
If any, that's yet to be determined, but I don't think it's going to go into an environmentally sensitive area like that. Okay.
That opening is really at the bottom of that piece of land.
It's
there,
right. It's right here, right, and this is all wetland here of significance. So I think where we talk about a fishing platform or a viewing platform or dock, for those of you familiar with it, there's kind of an area here where a launch and some docks are or were. It would be probably in that vicinity. It would make the most sense because it's accessible now without disrupting any wetland areas. So that would be my thought.
Right. But at this point in time, the where and the how and the what and the why is speculative until we actually have a plan. We can sit here and plan all day long, but until we possess it, we're not sure what and how we're going to do this.
And if I could also add, when you make application for a trust fund grant for development, you have to have the same type of public hearing. And so everyone will be invited back to participate in at that time. But prior to that, they'll have, Parks and Recreation meetings, and we'll be trying to get public input to even, and I'm foreshadowing, but we would be seeking public input on exactly how it's developed. So some of those questions and comments would be very important, especially for those of you who know this area well, to discuss at that time.
Okay. Yes, dear in the back. I'm sorry.
Sharon Kernan. I'm somewhat familiar with Mud Lake, but my concern is there's been a real big problem in Michigan, inland lakes, invasive species. Now you're saying you're going to have a public dock, people bringing in their canoes or kayaks or what have you. zebra mussels. They can attach when they're really small, and if they're not hosed off from going from lake to lake, now you're transferring invasive species into a pristine area. Are there, or will you be making any type of provisions for monitoring, which is really tough, or some sort of signage, because you will have invasive species?
I'm sure that we would take every precaution that we possibly reasonably can,
Yeah.
but you'll get more mollusk transplant egg sacs from the feet of waterfowl than you will from anything else.
That's true, but
So
I'm bringing it
I
from the lake.
if you want to start taking care of the Canadian geese, I know some people that'll go along with that. I've been accused of killing swans. I had not killed a single swan in my life, okay, but
No, but even some sort of signage, because I know even up north, there are signs at boat launches.
well, these would be exactly the type of things that when we come back to a development meeting, that this is the type of, that's when you bring it up, okay? Because right now, we can speculate till the day is long. We have to grab the opportunity first, and then we need to get together as a community and sit there and say, okay, what's gonna be the best thing that we want the purpose of this to be? It's not something that has to be a snap decision. We could acquire that land, and it might take us 2 or 3 years to very carefully and very methodically go down there and see what is the best use, how we want to deal with it, what do we want to do, how do we want to carve this out, what will stay, what could go, what we stay completely away from, because there are regulated wetlands down there on the south end, and believe me, we're going to stay away from that as far as necessary. Although people don't like to sometimes see that stuff, so, could somebody put a footpath along the edge of it to view the wildlife? Possibly, I don't know. And these are all ideas that every one of you would have the input to put into this type of thing. And it would be a very exciting opportunity for the community to get involved in this kind of a project. Next question. Yes, sir.
Actually, I don't have a question. My name is Mark Lambert, and I'm the president of the Lakewood Village Homeowners Association. And just for everybody else's knowledge, they were both Mr. Colwell and Mike Rowan both came to our monthly meeting last night, and we had they offered through one of our board members found out and asked them to come, so they took the time to come and explain. Very, very similar to what we've heard today, but we had a chance to discuss it among some of our members in the homeowners association as well as the board members. And I don't need to repeat. I mean, the one thing that I will say is the Six Rivers organization, because I've been part of that, and it really is the Six Rivers that are really adjacent, the Flint and the Shiawassee and the Huron and all the ones in Clinton that are right here. So they do a great job, and so I'm familiar with, and I'm really glad they're back in this project as well. So there's just so many good things. By the time we got done, what was done was we said, let's take a, let's make a resolution. We made a motion and made a resolution as a board, and I wanted to read it because we did this last night. The Lakewood Village Improvement Association moves to support the purchase by White Lake Township of parcels 1227-100-001, 1227-100-002, and 1227-100-003 for purposes including the development of a municipal park understood to be void of any boat ramp or swimming beach, which is really what we talked about last night. So we thank you very much for doing that. We think it's a great idea, and what we would like to do is certainly offer our services. We spend a lot of money on that lake. There was a couple other homeowners associations that joined us because they just heard and they were invited. So, you reached out and it was great. You got to talk to, a myriad of people that really are around the lake. And it was Brendel Heights. There were some people from Brendel Heights that were there last night as well. So we certainly would be interested in, we spend of our budget, from our homeowners association budget, probably, and Al's not here, but I'd say it's probably 60 to 80% of our homeowners budget, maybe even more than that, goes towards maintenance of that lake. From it was chemicals, and now we switched over and we're doing some lake management through weed harvesting. So there's been a lot of stuff that's been going on. We're really, now we're participating with Oakland County relative to lakes quality and doing a lot of stuff there and testing, so we're doing all that. So there's a lot of effort that goes into the maintenance of that lake, and we're really proud of it, and we will certainly help and would like the opportunity to be part of the development of this thing and anything that you guys would do. We've got a lot of talented people that have a lot of, that have time.
Well,
and-
nothing
and
like
whatever.
talking to people that have the intimate knowledge.
So, thank you very much. We appreciate you guys doing this opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Brian Lovejoy. I'm also a board member with the LVIA. One of the things we did want to ask, and we wanted to ask you asked for our support, and we think this is a great idea in many respects, but I think I can, forgive me if I say this, but I think I speak for all the riparians of the lake. Our biggest concern is additional lake access. And we're hearing a lot of approve it now and plan it later. And there's certainly makes some logic to that. But if we could get a commitment from this board that there will not be a boat ramp, I think you'll get a much better response and much more support from this group. Frankly, even as a condo development, we don't have a problem with neighbors. We have a problem with a very small lake, which is smaller yet if you look at the actual navigable waterway. There's a lot of sandbars, and a busy weekend, it becomes a dangerous lake as it is. So that is one of our main concerns, is that somewhere along the line in this planning stage that someone decides that, hey, a little extra revenue through boat launch, what have you, or limited boat launch, what may seem limited to this board, who don't spend the time on the lake, don't live on the lake, haven't invested a good part of their life savings on being on that lake, may not seem that big a deal. It is to us. And we would hope that when the planning stages come into play, that the riparians of this lake are not only welcome but perhaps invited onto a planning board. I assume there would be some type of planning board for the development to have real meaningful input put into this, since this is our lake. Granted, it's the township's lake as well, it's the state's lake as well, but we're the ones who live there.
Well, you're the
We're ones
closest
who pay
neighbor.
taxes there. The one other question I wanted to ask, do we know, what was the date of the letter of willingness to sell? Do we know that?
Well, this all came up pretty quick. It was a February
I
date.
can't remember the exact date. I've got a copy of it. I don't have it with me.
Was it
right now.
February?
It was just in the last few weeks.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for
Could
doing
I
this.
ask Brian a question before he
Sure,
sits down, please?
Absolutely.
I want to make sure that I understand. Certainly, I'm personally opposed to a boat ramp, but I'd like your input regarding a canoe, a kayak, a paddle boat, something that it can be hand-launched off the shore. And I didn't know, are you guys opposed to the public using that lake at all?
I don't think I can speak for myself, and I know a lot of my neighbors. I think I can speak for some of my neighbors. I don't think we're opposed to any usage of the lake. I don't think we're those people.
Okay.
However, having a full-blown canoe livery down there, where we can put 20 or 30 of those on the lake in a day, we have a lot of wakeboard boats on our lake. And you're going to wind up having serious safety issues. A wakeboard boat puts up a 3.5 foot wake, and we have multiples running on the weekend.
I don't
And
know
you've
what a
got lot of-
wakeboard is.
It's like a ski boat that has water ballast in the back, so it puts up a tremendous wake.
Oh.
Like a 3-4 foot wake,
surfing.
like this big.
This
You
is
can
not-
You can surf on the wake without a rope.
Wow, okay.
We have
Cool.
a number of those on the lake, and it's difficult enough for full-size ski boats or normal-sized lake boats to navigate. And I'm just saying, if the mindset is perhaps a canoe livery or something like that, we're going to have some serious safety issues. So personally, and I can only say that personally, I don't have a problem with other people sharing our lake with that type of passive craft. But I think there should be some consideration of limiting the numbers. Otherwise, it's going to be a serious safety risk, if for no other reason.
Well, these are the types of things that when we get into planning of the park, that it all can be brought up. It's too early. We can't make any kind of resolution or guarantee at this point on a property we don't own. But as Mike Powell says, I am, and I made my case the other night, I have no intention, in my mind's eye, of a boat launch being any part of it.
Nothing with a motor.
Nothing with a motor.
Well, I honestly, no offense, Rick, but I honestly question whether you can't make a resolution saying that should this come to pass, that boat launches would not be in the plan.
I don't think council would recommend that, okay?
Well, and I'd have to ask why. It only causes a problem if there's a concern that we may change our mind on that. If we may change your mind on that, you're going to have some people changing their mind on a lot of things, including chairs in this room.
Yep.
I don't know that approving, Sean, I don't know, approving anything other than the resolution provided to you by the state would be acceptable.
That's all the state really requires, so anything beyond that would just be whatever you desire to communicate to the public. I mean,
That's the next step.
I don't think there's a problem with you guys sharing your opinion on the issue, but that's not what the state, that's not what I'm asking for
It's not
tonight.
part
Not
of the-
because I
what you
disagree,
need.
I don't have an issue. I'm just saying that that's,
I guess what I'm asking you is the state wants the resolution that they gave you, and you applying any conditions that you choose to put in this state resolution could affect the acceptance of the grant?
Actually, I looked at the point schedule for this, and there's nothing in there that would affect our point schedule if we said that we are not going to include a boat launch. There's nothing in the point schedule that addresses that.
So first of all, I don't know anything about this grant. That's why I was asking Sean what it provided. And second of all, I mean, I know you didn't ask my personal opinion, but I think it would be premature for you to place any guarantees one way or another without A, having the property, or B, doing your due diligence and hearing from the public when it comes to the development stage.
Yeah.
The public's here, and there's a
Not
great deal of-
everybody's here. People
no, and
who
you're
are
not going to have everybody here, so let's not go there, please. We have a great deal of riparians here who you have asked for our support in this, and we're having a public hearing. This, not particularly this particular board, but we have had situations with the township board before, condo development in case in hand, which many of these people suffered through that, where we were told one thing and assured that that would not happen, and literally within hours, things were changed. So there is some distrust here, and when we're talking about one key element of this, to not get a commitment from the board, which wouldn't change the opportunity to get the grant, so we could feel a little bit better about this. It's a key element. The only reason for hesitation would be that in the back of your head, you're thinking that may be something we want to do.
Mr. Supervisor, I'd like to speak
Go
to
ahead,
that.
Mr. Powell.
I honestly feel, and I understand what you're saying. I personally feel that this was advertised for the acquisition of this piece of property. When it comes to the use, I expect it to be advertised differently, and we'll get a great many more opinions than just yours. And I'd like to hear them. So I don't want to blindside those that aren't here today because it wasn't advertised for that. I'd like to stick to what's advertised, and then we'll have to stand on our own when it comes up to time, if we're blessed to have this, to where we can then issue some motion regarding that. So I think it's very premature.
just,
Yes, Mr. Ruggles.
Sorry, Sean.
no, go ahead.
I'd like to say, so my family and I, we go down to Brenda Lake all the time in the summer. We go to a little park where the beach is, a swimming area, and I don't know the name of it. We have some friends that live there, so we go out all the time, and it's beautiful because hardly anyone uses it. So we're there, and the one thing that I do notice is the lake is so busy. It's like dangerous just watching it from jumping off the swim platform. So I understand exactly what you're saying, and I agree with you. And I personally feel that there's no way that I would allow a dock and boats and anything of that nature. And I don't think that you're being told otherwise here tonight. And I would do whatever I can as a trustee to ensure that you feel that I'm telling you what I believe, and I would do what I can to sign something to say that, but like Mr. Powell states, we're just a little bit ahead of schedule on being able to do that. I don't know if there's something that we could do internally amongst ourselves, but that's up to the supervisor and the attorney, but that's my feeling on it. So if I'm sitting here, you know, my position won't change, and I would do whatever I could do to convey that.
Sean?
I don't know that it's necessary or appropriate to add this to a resolution to purchase land or enter into their process. That really has not, that would be out of place to go into this resolution. That doesn't mean you can't give other assurances or take other actions separate from this tonight to address the issue, one way or another. Whether it's to wait, whether it's to do a special meeting in 3 months while we're in the middle of this process, that's up to you. But this is simply the whereas and what for is related to applying for a grant to purchase property through the trust fund and to match to a certain dollar amount. That's all that they're after, and the rest of it is not.
Let me be very blunt, however. You talking about support, if this board doesn't go forward with this, the next developer's gonna step up and will in fact use that beach for what you don't want. And so you have what's before you now. You can say withdraw support or whatever, but I can guarantee you the next developer isn't gonna be nearly as forthcoming as we are.
We fought the last developer, and we limited it down to a minimal number of slips, and we actually convinced the builder to withdraw. And the fire department explained that it was illegal, and slightly after he explained it was illegal to have a single access, this board passed a resolution to allow a single access to a community, which is illegal by state law. So you got to give us a little ground here that we're a little leery about some of the decisions that aren't made,
Okay.
and things that are being put off. We want to support the program. We have a serious concern, and we haven't always seen real transparency from this room. And again, no one personally, but from this room. And that is a concern of the members of my community board, which is 420 some homes, I believe, in White Lake.
Okay.
And I know it's also a concern of the Brendel Heights side of the lake, as well as the other subdivision on the lake. So I just wanted to state my opinion, and I agree that it perhaps should not be in the resolution there. I do feel that this board could give us a statement of faith, saying that this will not be in the plan moving forward.
Well, we're still
Whether you get the grant or-
we're still in public comment here, so we want to get through some more of the public comment. Yes, sir.
Ron Creek, do you plan on maybe possibly making it bigger, like with the triangle piece up there and some of the other lots?
That
acquiring them?
particular parcel of land belongs to a separate group. Okay, we were able to secure an easement through that triangle
Okay.
when we did our initial purchase of the property along Elizabeth Lake Road, not knowing we even had a snowball's chance in Hades of getting
Is that
this.
gonna be part of the park then too, then?
That was just a walk down, little possible
Totally separate.
pier, whatever, just to see the water, maybe have a wedding down there, whatever, a ceremony on the end of a dock or something, whatever, people watch the sun go down the lake. Now that this has evolved, it's possible somewhere along the line, if that was able to be attained, it could be by the developer that owns it, a bargaining chip for them in other developments that they have, that they may use that as possible mitigation. And if that's the case, they may end up, if, and I'm speculating, this is all speculation here, if in another development they have something else going on, their mitigation cost might say that there's so many acres of wetlands and we want to fill something over here out at 12 Mile and Mound, therefore we'll dedicate this to replace that at a 1-to-1, 2-to-1, 3-to-1, whatever ratio, and mitigate it, and then it could become parkland, and then the township could absorb it, and possibly at no cost, okay, and then preserve it. So, but I don't have any control over that piece of land at this point in time.
And that's this triangle right here.
That one's
Which is mostly wet, yeah. Any other comment?
Yeah, it's all of it.
Yes, sir.
Yep, Bill Dow, I'm a board member on Brendel Heights. To expound on what Ronnie was asking and what you mentioned, you're talking about a boardwalk through that area on the township portion.
Well, these are all just possibilities, we don't know.
So there's a potential of and I've heard you say this, a pier down there and also a pier on the other parcel. So we're looking at two piers
Well,
out
it
there.
may not be now that we have this other one. We didn't have this before, opportunity.
And I understand you haven't made any decisions and you're still working on a plan.
And you will be a part of it.
And we certainly do want to be part of that. And to strengthen where Brian was going is we're very sensitive about the fact that we're going from what we consider a private lake to a public, the general public, not just White Lake Township, general public. So it's a sensitive issue. We think the plan's a great plan, but we do need the confidence and the support your board that there won't be a boat launch.
Yeah.
Can it be a separate resolution by the board tonight is what I think we're looking for, separate from what's required for the land
Yeah,
development.
I am not going to take any chance on anyone else's information other than Sean O'Neill's as to what goes on that application to the DNR.
And this is separate of that.
As
Completely
far
separate.
as anything else goes, I mean, I personally have stated it, I don't want a powerboat launch there. Here, public record in front of 33,000 residents, okay?
Me too.
Me three.
4,
5. Okay. There is not a hidden agenda here. We do not, we understand the controversy. I was around when all that went down. Okay, I was a fly on the wall back here for about 10 minutes in one of the meetings and left. And I understand it. I don't know what I can do to convince you folks that part of why I'm doing this is because I know the sensitive nature of this project. Okay? When I saw this opportunity, I thought, wow, here's a way to kill a bunch of birds, a whole flock of them, with one stone. Save the lake, keep boats off of it, get rid of Deliverance Avenue, and create something that would be adjoining our future community. Now I sound like I'm repeating myself, but if you really think this through for the future, what better is it going to be to have a community that you'll have like an entire walkable area there just to kind of enjoy nature and what we offer. I mean, we're so blessed to have what we have here.
Just one more question. Is there any plans, you say this has been on your radar for a long time?
yes, every bit, yeah.
Okay. Is there any plans for the parcel where the fire station is now that will be moved in the future? I know you mentioned last night that you're looking at possibly selling that for revenue.
We're going to sell it to an Indian nation and put it in a casino.
My question is there a plan in the works to possibly create another park there also?
I do not know. We can only have so many parks. We're going to be
That's
foregoing a park back here, which is another purpose of this. This is multifaceted. This property here is going to go commercial and go on a commercial tax roll. What we're sitting on. You're looking at
I'm
13.
referring to across the street.
I understand. So you're looking at $13 to $18 million probably worth of potential development on this site. That park will go away. This is a great trade up, okay, for this land that we're going to displace, okay? For us to sit here and try to go through the park when we have a lot of parkland in the township already, and the township only has a few parks, I don't want to be park poor in the sense that we can't have the ability to maintain what we have. So the destiny for what lies for that land across the street,
Yeah, I just didn't know if anything.
I have
was-
no idea. Yeah, unbeknown.
At one time, in the last, I've been on Parks and Rec for about 10 years, we had talked about doing a little pocket park right, like by the general area of the vet. And that's not on our Parks and Rec master plan right now, if I'm thinking properly, but yeah.
Okay.
We have talked about that.
I still want, I'm not there, I want to
Okay,
keep going with
good.
the public comment end of it because we got to get through this part. Any other input, public comment? Yes, sir.
My name's Kim Turner, and like several of us here, I live directly across from the campground. Matter of fact, Steve and I and John and I, we live right across from us. So for the last 30 years, I think the idea of having some control via the city versus a private individual, I mean, it gets pretty crazy back in there over the 30 years. I mean, we're looking directly across at it. I mean, there's every jet ski, every wacko, every whatever that's going on over there. They're partying their brains out. It goes up through its ups and downs, but at least we can get back to some kind of control over it. And I think that's a good step forward. I think if we can get that kind of money towards that in terms of what our opportunity is, which is not too good, as we saw a few years back. I think this is probably our best shot right here. I'm all for it.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Yes, sir.
Steve Woodard, and his next door neighbor, and
Co-partier?
Yeah. So, addressing the invasive species and zebra mussels and all that stuff that come in through, for the last probably forever, 50 years that campground's been there, it's been essentially a public avenue for, we're a private lake, but it's a public access in all intents. And so we've had zebra mussels, and I feel very strongly that it came in through that portal. We've got invasive species of plants on the lake. Who knows where they came from, but could likely have come from, live wells on boats that came in to go fishing on that lake. Having this become a township park is spectacular. I'm excited to get that cleaned up and make it a township park is win, 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 win. So thank you guys for looking out for it.
Yes, sir.
Rostrom. I live probably the closest to the park over there. I think the acquisition is a good idea, but I have concerns about the development, and I'll be back when we're talking about that stuff.
Understand. And again, I think you heard the board, and I think we'll all do this, the right-handed pledge. It's just that right now, I am not wanting to fog the acquisition in any way, shape, or form. And that is what is the most important thing right now. Once we have it, believe me, we'll all be back in here. We'll get someplace with a little more room. It has some nice, good conversation, constructive conversations. Anyone else? Public comment? Yes, sir.
Dan Springer, but just concerned about the triangle, like you said, is that a private owner? Or
Private owner. Yeah. Yes, sir. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Melissa Cummings. I'm curious about cleaning it up. How does that happen? Is that part of the money come from the grant? Because there's awful trailers and
Yeah,
mess.
there are.
I'm sure it's a mess.
The process that Mr. O'Neill mentioned earlier was there's the acquisition grant, and then there's they call it a development grant. Now, development to them could be putting in a drinking fountain and 2 feet of trail. It's not buildings and condos. It's just the development of what amenities you need to have that. And part of that would be, and part of the requirement of the grant, in the grant, is to clean up the property. So that's part of it. So, and there's monies available to do that. So this would be a secondary.
Come from the buying money. It has to be-
We would have to go ahead. Believe me, there's a lot of practice burns down there, but that's another story. So, yes, sir.
Matt Bear, my question's for Mr. O'Neill. Is your presentation available at the Township website or in another location?
This is not, but I would be happy to email it to you. I would have to talk to IT, but we could probably put it up on the website under a Parks and Rec tab. Just give me till tomorrow afternoon. It's an off-site company that we deal with, but
And we wanted to kind of get through this because if everybody came in here and we wouldn't, that'd be it. That's done. We're done. Okay. And
Rex, they will be able to watch it on the YouTube channel.
Okay.
They go to the white.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it's right here.
Actually.
Click on the link to the YouTube channel, you'll be able to see it there.
you can watch this whole
It'll be
thing
part
over
of the
again.
meeting, but it's in the meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. One more comment? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
real quick, they talked about cleaning it up. Do we expect any environmental concerns in there? Because over a lot of years of dumping stuff.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not sure, however, that is part of the process, okay, to see what there is. Okay, any more public comment? So I am going to close public comment. One more. Yes, sir.
Rick, I just want to express on behalf of everybody in the room, realistically, I think many of us here, August Becker, 6347 Ellenwood, White Lake, Michigan, Lakewood Village, been out here since '95, been on a number of different lakes. We've seen things change, let's be realistic, and that's part of the concern. Probably because initially it wasn't supposed to change, but things eventually changed. But I would say that already numerous discussions There's a lot of people here that spent hours over the last several years because water quality became such an issue for us, as it has for the state, as it has, that's why I'm happy to hear about this grant stuff, because it's the real deal. You know, we all want better quality of life. Let's be honest, that's why we live here. So anything we can do to support that, we're with you. We have very knowledgeable people in our neighborhood, and I think a few of them are more than happy to form a subcommittee, your committee, and I don't even make sure, because I would agree on this report to the government, you want to make damn sure you dot your i's and cross your t's. You know, let's be realistic, and the better we make that presentation, the better our chances of getting this.
Yes, sir.
So we support you 100%, and I appreciate the fact that you brought it to our attention right away.
You're very welcome. Well, it's something I...
Let's put this thing together and let's make it happen.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other public comment? Make a motion to close public comment.
Support.
Motion, support, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We have now closed public comment. Thank you. Moving on to resolution number 18003. I would
Yes.
like to read this resolution.
I just wanted to point out to everyone who this was distributed to in the board, we've cited
Comment.
other sources after recreational fund millage and general fund dollars as far as where the money will come from, because we have been contacted by a couple of folks who are interested in making donations. So we wanted to include the other sources for those types of, to cover those kinds of funds. So that's why that change on what I handed out today exists compared to what was in your packet.
Thank you, sir. Charter Township of White Lake, Oakland County, Michigan. Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund Grant 2018, resolution number 18-003. Whereas the Township Board of the Charter Township of White Lake does hereby authorize the Township Supervisor's Office to take the appropriate steps to submit an application to the Michigan Department of Natural Resources for an acquisition grant through the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund. Whereas a public hearing meeting was held on March 13, 2018 at the White Lake Township office to provide an opportunity for citizens to express opinions, ask questions, and discuss all aspects of the grant application for the acquisition of approximately 57 acres of property located at 10785 Elizabeth Lake Road, formerly known as the Brundle Lake Campground. Whereas the grant is to fund the acquisition of real property, 57 acres property located at 1075 Elizabeth Lake Road, the Brundle Lake Campground, for the purposes of creating a White Lake Township Park, tentatively named Brundle Lake Park, as identified in the 2018-2022 White Lake Township Recreation Plan. Naming rights will be for sale. Whereas the source of the township's share of matching funds are authorized to come from the White Lake Parks and Recreation millage, general fund dollars, or other sources. Whereas the township supervisor is authorized to sign documents related to the grant, now therefore be it resolved that the Township Board of the Charter Township of White Lake authorize the township supervisor to apply the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund acquisition grant with the township's matching 26% of the appraised value not to exceed $500,000 in fiscal year 2019. Roll call vote.
Liz Smith?
Yes.
Don't we have to make a motion and second it first?
I'm sorry.
I beg your
Yep.
pardon. Need to make a motion to adopt the resolution 18. I was reading
make
the
a
whole
motion.
resolution. That was it.
Yeah.
I was doing it. Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 18003.
I'll support that.
Roll call vote.
Yes.
Thank you, Liz.
Andrea Voorhees,
Yes.
Mike Powell.
Since you didn't hold comments for the motion, I'd like to say a couple things as part of my answer to this. I'm normally not in favor of township buying property or government in general, buying property to just hold property. I think it is not the government's place to arbitrarily hold property. However, in this particular case, with the state hopefully willing to grant 74% of this, it would be inappropriate to vote no on this. And seeing that we have the funds available in the Park and Rec line item to be able to do this, I am in favor of it, so I'm going to vote yes.
Thank you.
Scott Ruggles?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Lilly votes yes. Mr. Cole?
Yes. All right, thank you. We will keep you posted.
Mr. Supervisor.
Anytime, one second, Ms. Smith. Anytime anyone wants to know the status of this, we'll try to have some postings on our website. We're continually trying to amend that. But please feel free to call my office. If a group from the lake, a couple of you want to get together and have a cup of coffee, I got an office at Tim Horton. Okay, so just call me and let me
Got an
know.
office on a pontoon boat on the lake.
I like that idea better.
We'll go
Is there
on
any
that.
other way?
Yeah. After we stop at Tim Horton. Okay, so, all right. Please, I expect a call.
Okay.
You will get it.
Thank you. All right.
Mr. Supervisor, before our residents leave, since we didn't have an opportunity to speak before the roll call vote, so thank you, Mr. Powell, I appreciate your comments. I just wanted to say to the HOA members that came, thank you. I appreciate it. I hear you. I'm listening to you. I'm so sorry that you feel like there was some distrust before. But I do believe that this board has the best of intentions, and I would like to encourage you to stay involved. And I'll pledge to you right now that I'm going to make that part of this deal moving forward, that I'm going to ask for a resident committee on that. So thank you, and I look forward to hearing from you again.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. To new business. Item 11A. We'll give a minute here to clear the room. Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Looks like Rick had a good idea.
Got light in here. Okay. Okay. Mr. Clerk, item 11A, would you like to run with it?
Mr. Supervisor, at the last meeting, brought a letter of intent to give a promotion to our water and sewer director. And before you is a copy of a revised employment agreement. And would recommend to the board that this has been reviewed by our Human Resource Department as well as the labor attorney, and recommend approval of the employment agreement.
Thank you. I did notice that there was a typo. I think we found it earlier today, and a few of us found it. I don't think you have a 401A.
That is a 401A.
It is.
It is a problem.
I stand corrected. Okay, all right. Well, so much for that correction, Mike.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do have another correction, however, while we're just discussing this. The term under number 1, the term is really described in section 6 of this agreement, not section 5.
Yeah, that's true. You're correct. Damn engineer. Okay, I'd like to, any questions from the board?
I'll make a motion to approve the employment agreement with the water sewer director.
I will support that. The motion, we have support?
I asked Aaron to leave the room so we can really talk what we think about him. But no, we're good.
A motion and support, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
You are now our official DPS guy.
On lunch tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving into Oakland County Tri-Party Agreement, the 2018 Gravel Road Program. And I know This is for monies that we try to match to, there's a three-party agreement for monies that come in to maintain the gravel roads throughout our township. The county has been trying to maintain them, and actually has done a pretty good job over the last few years. Last year in particular, the last 2 years in particular, they put a tremendous amount of tonnage of a little better material down. And one point in particular, because I really tried to attract as much attention to it as possible, was Pontiac Lake Road on that last stretch that is not paved. They changed their contract to a 23, a
little tighter material.
Grade, a tighter material. And it is a little more expensive, but it has made a significant difference in the road surface and the amount of dust that those poor people have to deal with on that road. I mean, it's just ungodly what I've seen going down that road. So we're trying to make sure that we, in areas where we can do things to make life a little better for people, I'd like to do so. Any comments from the board?
I warned you.
I knew that was coming.
At the last year, I made mention that gravel roads, as important as they are, and I've grown up on gravel roads all my life, and I totally understand where the residents are coming from on gravel roads. We put a lot of money into gravel roads, and quite frankly, gravel roads can swallow up money from now until the end of time, and they'll always need more. And so I was trying to get this township to do some road improvements, some paving of roads that, and or improving some intersections that might be better in safety. My first thought was if we could pave the first 150 feet of gravel roads that outlet into a paved street. It will stop the washboard effect when people leave the pavement and get on to try to make that curve. And it will certainly help people stop as they approach the paved road, the major paved roadway. And this is $176,000 that I believe could do 2, if not 3, of those roadways and improve the township permanently instead of just putting gravel down. And so I will be voting no on this because I'd like to see it put somewhere where we could most benefit the public safety. And so, thank you, Mr. Supervisor.
I understand, and this is due April 1st.
I understand that.
Forward. Any other questions from the board? Anyone else? Going once?
Well, it's not so much of a, go ahead, Terry.
No, go ahead.
It's not so much as a question, but I find Mr. Powell's points valid on this. Can we table this? I understand it's due the 1st of April, you said?
Yes.
Right? But I would like the opportunity to explore that.
I think we're amiss for this year. We don't have the time. And we just will not have the time to meet the requirements of the county. It's something we can look at next year. There are some things I'm trying to do to get some additional road funding. And have been putting pressure on places that I can to do it for the township.
Let me challenge that just a little bit, Mr. Supervisor. It's probably April 1 in order to gear up for the graveling of the roads.
This document needs to be to them.
This is for graveling of the roads.
Correct.
However, I happen to know that the Act 51 funds are available and the tri-party funds are available all the way through 2018, and all we have to do is request a consideration of reprogramming these dollars. And so this is, in order to gravel the roads, I believe April 1's the right date. But in order to do additional improvements, I believe that the April 1 is not the deadline for this.
I understand your concern,
Yep.
but I respectfully disagree.
And I'm good with that.
And I state that we have far more gravel roads that are in need of resurfacing, and I do not want to explain to a few residents that we've done some improvements in certain areas, and yet their road that's gone to hell in a handbasket because of the winter that we've had is not going to get any gravel this year.
And I submit that's the exact same statement you made last year.
It's the same one I'll make next year.
If that's the case, then my argument won't hold water unless my board members agree.
We have a lot of roads in here that are in need. We probably have about 2 more years or 3 more years until we hit a cycle of such, we don't have a real tough winter. that we may be able to pursue an avenue like this. Now, I will tell you, I am going to a strategic road funding meeting with the Road Commission, and I'm going to pull the lid off the can and see what's inside.
I'd appreciate that. Okay.
And
Thank you.
that's all I can tell you, but I do not want to shortchange anyone on the gravel.
Yep. Amen. As someone that drives a lot of dirt roads, thank you.
Mr. Roman?
So the cost of the project, $176,000. County pays a third.
Correct.
We pay a third.
Correct.
The road commission.
The road
Oh, I was
commission.
curious who the other third was.
Yeah, the road commission.
The
Community, county,
is the
and
road commission.
right. Yep. Can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the cost participation agreement for the tri-party road program. For project number 54242.
Okay, I have a motion, looking for support.
Support. Go ahead, Scott.
Support from Mr. Ruggles, all in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No,
The Lone Ranger.
the Lone Ranger. I can handle it.
Okay. Ay, ay, ay. We're going to item 11C, preliminary site plan, Aspen Meadows Phase 2, file number 17-20. Mr. O'Neill.
Thank you. You have before you some information regarding Aspen Meadows Phase 2. This is immediately adjacent to Aspen Meadows Phase 1. I'm going to bring up an aerial to kind of help with orientation. So we're all sitting right about here. So it's up Porter Road to Grass Lake. Here is Aspen Meadows Phase 1 that was approved in 2001. I believe the entire parcel that they own was rezoned at that time. Back in the day, you used to be able to rezone property to PD without a site plan. That changed in 2003. However, this parcel, which is where they intend to construct Aspen Meadows Phase 2, was rezoned at that time and has continued to be zoned PD without a site plan in anticipation of this Phase 2 coming forward. So it's a bit unique in that you're dealing with a PD project that you didn't rezone because it just has been in that state for a number of years, and there are a couple of other examples around the township, so I wanted to point that out. So that's where we're that's what we're talking about, or where we're talking about this project going. So at the Planning Commission meeting of March 1st, there was action taken to recommend approval of this request for preliminary site plan approval to the Township Board. With one caveat, there was discussion and initially a motion made to not require a traffic impact study or a community impact statement. That motion did not carry, and a subsequent motion was made that requires a community impact statement. Those requirements can be found in section 6.6 of the zoning ordinance and are pretty straightforward. Again, the only thing they won't have to do is a traffic study, which is a part of that per the Planning Commission's direction. So there were a number of residents from Alpine View Estates, which is immediately, you can see here while I still have that up, there are larger lot homes immediately to the east, and they put a petition, they gave a petition to the Planning Commission citing some of their concerns, which were traffic, environmental impact, and kind of drainage related, water quality related impact questions. There were a lot of questions about stormwater that we got into the specifics on, and a lot of the discussion and a lot of their questions and concerns can be found in the minutes that are attached. So again, the recommendation of the Planning Commission was approval, subject to all the review comments of the staff and consultants, which are in your packet, as well as the requirement to have the applicant or the developer provide a community impact statement, but not a traffic study. And I will put the site plan up. It's a busy plan because there's a lot of information. It's hard to see in the computer screen because it's smaller, and that's a horrible projector, so that makes that tough to look at. But there is that layout on that triangular shaped parcel. That's Aspen Meadows Phase 1 right here, and then the two roads that will cross the ITC corridor and go into this 39 unit single family development. There are some elevations in your packet, but for the residents who may be interested, I believe I have one electronically. For some reason I don't have the other one, but the question came up about ranch homes, and obviously the market desires ranch homes now, and so I assume that there'll be a number of ranch style homes. But this is a type of quality that they're proposing to build. A lot of brick, 3-car garages. So they're not
Basically a continuation of phase 1.
basically, yes, and I think that is kind of what to expect. I thought I just heard somebody say how much, and I assume they mean house cost. They're saying 350 to 400,000, I believe, was the cost that was discussed. I think they had mentioned that someone in phase 1 had gotten closer to 450. Or did he say 500? I mean, it was a very high number. I thought he said it was well over 400,000 with options. Joe Kosick is the developer. He may be sitting behind me, as may Pat McWilliams from Kieft Engineering, who is the engineer in this project, and they may
I don't see him.
seek to add further information. So,
Not here.
Okay.
You're really not here? Okay.
well,
I'm surprised.
Very good.
You can say whatever you want.
so yeah, I'm not here to present their project, but those are the facts, and I will be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
This particular phase, this has barely more or less been on the books since this was inception in 2001.
Yes, and I should also add that approximately 10 years ago, 11 years ago, Mr. Kosick came in and made application to go through the approval process for this very same parcel. After one review in the economy in a spiral, in I want to say it was late 06 or 07, he just said, I'm gonna wait. And I've heard from him every couple years that he hasn't forgotten that he owns this property, and he still intends to do a phase 2. It should also be noted these will all be on our community water system, but they'll all be served by private septic systems. And they have their preliminary approval from Oakland County, and they've done all their perk tests. That's why there are so many boxes here on the screen, because many of them are to kind of denote the location of a septic field and a reserve field. So I'm kind of zooming in a little bit, it makes it easier. So there's, again, a lot of boxes. These are indicative of a home site or a building envelope, and then the generally adjacent 2-color or different colored squares are the field locations. So these are the neighbors that had stopped at the plant or participated at the planning commission on a snowy night and had some concerns. There were some residents in the first phase that were questioning timing, and it sounds like it's going to be a couple years before this is, fully complete if the economy continues in its current trajectory.
Very good. Okay.
And I could talk all night, but I'll stop.
Any further questions from the board?
Yeah.
Mr. Lilly.
For Sean. In the original motion that the planning commission made, it was to acknowledge all the deficiencies and that a development agreement be provided, which is a requirement, and that a community impact statement is required, and to consider consultant and staff comments. Are you suggesting that all of the comments by the consultants and the staff need to be complied with?
They do as a part of their final site plan, and I think those are the deficiencies that were cited in that motion.
And what was meant by the deficiencies?
I think the deficiencies, and I don't know if Mr. Ruggles wants to add to that, I think that was just the way the motion was made, but I think it's all of the necessary items.
Really, the staff can...
That's right, to comply with. Right. And that, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
I just have a statement. Obviously, I believe this is in my opinion, an acceptable plan, and it certainly complies with the zoning ordinance and the previous PUD approval. I couldn't help but note some of the comments from the residents that came to the Planning Commission, and we've certainly heard of them before. We're going to be changing their view, and their backyard's not going to be the same, and various other things. Some of the technical items, I believe, the township engineer has dealt with very, very well. I guess I would like to at least make the statement so that people might understand. They had 17 years to put together a SAD or put together their funds, and they could have approached Mr. Kosick any time over the last 17 years to purchase that property from him. Developers, if the price is right, they would certainly And this is certainly a property rights issue. Mr. Cossack owns it. It meets all our requirements, and so I will be voting approval on this. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor.
Thank you very much.
The other comment I wanted to get out was the need for the community impact. It just seems a little bit strange that we would require that for the type of addition that they're putting on
Yeah,
right
it's-
now, and what the need for that really is.
I think that was the feeling of maybe the three who supported moving ahead without the community impact statement and traffic study, because again, the ordinance says that if you're doing a PD, which this is, and you're proposing a special land use, that you go through this process. Now, same with the traffic study, but we've got most of the development already there. This is 39 homes adding to 87, 88 homes.
Right.
And I think that was the take on it.
Using the
Obviously,
same road
right, they're going to
areas.
use Grass Lake through the existing curb cuts that the Phase 1 project already makes, the 2 curb cuts. One is paved, it's paved to the first one, and not to the second one, the more westerly one. So I think that was the position that some of them had taken, and I don't know if Mr. Ruggles wants to speak to that more, but Terry, I think you bring up a good point, and I mean, I see both sides of it, but I mean, some of the things that you're asking them to quantify, I mean,
I'm willing to make a motion for discussion.
Okay, did you have anything to add, Mr. Ruggles?
I would just say at the planning commission, there was a lot of discussion. This was talked about in depth. And you can see as the motion failed and then the motion passed, we struggled with it. And so I think in order to feel comfortable and to pass this, we wanted that community impact statement, just because of all the residents that were concerned and all the reasons that they brought up. So we're a little uneasy not having it, rather than moving forward without it. So that
Okay.
was just the feeling of the planning commission.
Thank you. Mr. Lilly?
I'm willing to make a motion for discussion that the Township Board approve a preliminary site plan and that a development agreement be provided, which is a requirement, and that a community impact statement not be required, and to consider the consultant and staff comments that they must comply with.
Look, may I have a motion and support?
I'll support that for discussion.
Discussion.
Sean, give us some examples of the items that would be covered in a community impact statement.
Okay, contents of community. I mean, basically a brief description of the land use proposed. It's pretty straightforward, including hours of operation, if applicable, which it's not. Impact on adjacent uses, noise, smoke, dust, etc., and other pertinent data. Is the land use proposed consistent with the master plan and zoning ordinance? Community facilities and services, estimated demand on police services, estimated demand on fire services, estimated number of sewer or water taps, estimated number of axle loading, estimated number and axle loading of trucks daily over proposed route through township. Describe present road cross-section adequacy to handle proposed traffic and or upgrade needed to handle proposed traffic. Describe any significant impacts related to community facilities and services, the economics of it, or anticipated number of construction and permanent jobs, anticipated tax revenue for the township and to the school district, environmental impacts. Describe the area and type of natural features in the site, including streams, rivers, bodies of water, wetland, woodland, the like. Describe whether proposed use will include will include the manufacture, use, or storage of any hazardous materials. Provide a complete description of the types and quantities of pollutants that are expected to be emitted into the air as a result of this proposal, and describe how state and federal air quality standards will be met. Describe the impact the proposed development will have on groundwater quality and quantity. Describe necessary mitigation measures, noise, traffic. Provide current aerial photography of the site and surrounding properties within 1,500 feet of the site. Include an overlay showing the proposed development area and existing residential dwellings within 1,500 feet of the site. Provide any other information necessary to assess the impact if bless you, the proposed project on the surrounding community, or assess the impact if a proposed project on the surrounding community that doesn't make sense. The township may request additional data based upon the characteristics of the development proposed and the information on the person who's preparing it, including their credentials.
Thank you, Mr. Armio.
It's rather extensive and exhaustive.
Some of it's relevant, some of it's
A
irrelevant.
lot of it's irrelevant.
I mean, obviously that a lot of that has to do with like manufacturing type jobs, but it does certainly include both residential.
The question is, being a planning commission liaison, I respect your position.
Well,
You feel it's a pertinent part of this?
I would say that evening, one of the main issues that they were discussing is groundwater effect. This particular development has an issue with runoff, which you can see on the plan. And so this would speak to that. Also, they were talking about impact within structures within 1,500 feet. A lot of the concerned residents there are within that distance, and those were the ones that really had a lot of the concerns. Talking about a variety of things that some of it we didn't have the answers to. You're talking about they were concerned with septics. They're going to be at a higher elevation than their wells, so they didn't totally understand that, and I don't either. But I'm sure that's something that the county handles, so they'll do that appropriately. But I think there was a lot of uneasiness, just generally with all the residents in that subdivision, and it had to do with groundwater. It had to do with just the development in general. So this somewhat eased that tension, but I think it's worthwhile.
Are we able to do it with a limited scope to address
Yeah, more
just those
compact scope.
concerns?
I think you could, yes.
I think that might be the best way to look at that, would be to do more of a compact scope.
They really wanted to know about traffic. Especially
Road conditions
road
were
conditions.
a concern.
So all of the construction is going to be going through there, phase one. So it's going to be tearing up phase one during the construction phase, or at least, having an impact on them. You're going to be talking about water runoff. You're going to be talking about retention, detention, the effect on the subdivision to the right, the wells, the septics, what the condition of the subdivision is going to be during construction, how they're going to manage that, because these houses are at high elevations, much higher than the surrounding area, so that becomes a concern for them in particular. So that stuff could be discussed in this study.
Mr. Supervisor?
Yes.
Most of those items that Sean read certainly are very germane for a new project coming in.
Correct.
That this board might have to evaluate the impact on the entire area. This is a very, very finite and isolated area. The septic field is all Oakland County Health Department requirements. Our engineer has dealt with the stormwater issue. The soil erosion and dust is dealt with by the Oakland County Drain Commission's office. The roads are what they are. I mean, every homeowner there, their trucks that built their homes went over the same roads that this property owner utilizing. And so I don't believe that it's worthwhile to have, in my own personal opinion, that it's worthwhile having a community impact statement either.
Very good. Okay, we have motion to support the preliminary site plan with removing that clause. We have support to remove that clause.
Correct.
Okay. So with that, I would take a vote. All in favor to do a preliminary site plan approval as stated and amended, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
One opposed. Okay, item D is the Dublin Community Senior Center carpet. Well, from time to time, we have to maintain what we have. And there is money that has been set aside from the budget for the maintenance of the Dublin Community Center. And at the request of Kathy Gordon, my conversation we had, I asked her to go out and get 3 quotes for the scope of work that she had discussed with me. She has 3 prices that came in. One was from Exclusive Flooring for $8,885.26, of $92,3884, and Lowe's $10,958.90. She felt that Exclusive was more than capable of doing it. I personally am very familiar with who they are and have recommended them and would continue to do so. There's a plug. For that and being the little guy, and they were competitive and they were very responsive, and she felt very, very comfortable with them in coming out and reviewing the work. So I would like to make a motion to allow the Dublin Community Center to proceed with new flooring not to exceed $9,000.
As a current customer of Exclusive Flooring, I support that.
They do not pay us.
There's
They
a
don't
plug.
pay any of us.
Get them over here and fix a couple things here. So I made a motion, we have support, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank
Who
you very
supported that one?
Andrea.
Andrea.
Thank you very much. And if you notice the color that they're going with, it will not show coffee stains. Okay. Item E. We have something interesting this way comes. So. Want to talk about it? You want to talk about it? You want to talk about it? Let me know.
Happy to talk about it. We have some cemetery lots that were sold back in 1987 that when we did a review on those lots, they're in the roadway in the cemetery. We have discussed some options with the present owner of those lots that was about to sell those to another buyer. We have offered to trade those lots for 4 other lots in the subdivision, or in the cemetery, I should say. It would not behoove the township to hold on to those or keep those as lots when they're in the middle of the roadway.
Yeah.
Or on the side of the roadway, so.
How about the middle?
Yeah, I've discussed the issue with the gentleman that owns the property, given an opportunity to trade them for others that he wasn't interested in. He has requested that the township give him $550 for each of the 4 lots that are there as a, I guess, his compromise. We've tried everything that we know of to bring this to a reasonable act so that we don't have a problem in the future. So I guess at this particular point, asking the board to
Authorize the correction?
come up with an agreement to, and authorize him to sign that we would repurchase those lots back from him.
And this is to make a correction. Once I actually saw the plot and I saw what was done somewhere along the line,
I think it was, 87 if I'm not mistaken.
somebody arbitrarily added 4 lots to a row of lots, and they're underneath the road. So I don't quite know, this was an error done, and this is a correction of that error. Things happen. It's an interesting job. So I'd like to move that we make a correction of this.
I'd like to do that and ask the attorney to draw up some agreement that can be presented to the gentleman and signed and get these off of our record.
Yeah, I'd like to make this, authorize this correction to be made, and authorize the township attorney to pursue this venture in a timely manner.
What exactly is the correction?
Basically, we're going to repurchase those lots and remove them from inventory.
I get that, but you said something about $550.
That's what he's wants to settle for is $550 a lot to repurchase those.
Where do you come up with 550?
That's what he came up with.
Oh yeah. It says on here 800 for all four.
That's what we sold them for.
So is that what they're worth?
What's that?
So is that what they're worth?
Well,
Well, they don't exist even, so they.
We would sell those lots right now to 600 as
well, the problem is that
resident and for a non-resident. That's what-
600.
But we can't, we're not gonna be able to resell
you
those.
can't bury them under a road.
I think the gentleman's moving, and our fear is that he'll sell those.
We could probably drive over the grave, but we couldn't drive over the headstones.
It was an error that was made and just corrected. That's it. So I would, at this point, like to make a motion to authorize the township attorney to enter into.
To draft the
to draft
agreement
the
that you will
agreement
ultimately
that I
sign.
will ultimately sign. Thank you. I will ultimately sign it. I have a motion.
And authorize payment up to,
Well, yeah, I understood the agreement
There's
to
four
be
lots.
up to $550
okay,
Per
lot.
per lot.
Per
And that's
lot.
part of the motion.
That's
I'll
part of the
support
motion.
that motion.
I have motion, I have support.
Sorry.
Is it a ghoulish question?
Oh, I don't think so.
Are you really sorry?
How much room is there between these lots and 145? Between the 272 and the 145 there? I know this drawing's not to scale.
It's not, I was there.
They're drawn with crayon.
Okay, so,
You gotta remove those two that were added on the end. They have just enough room to get one
okay,
vehicle.
that's one way after we remove that.
Correct.
Thank you.
One way only.
That's what I
We
wanted
need
to know.
all of that territory that's
And
designated.
in particular, and when you turn there, you run over a couple people's toes, and I don't like doing that. Don't feel good about it. Okay? So. That's bad juju. I mean, you just respect. So, okay, a motion, support, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, put that one to rest.
Aye.
No.
I'm taking them when I can get them, I'll tell you.
Did I support your motion, or did you support mine?
I don't know, either take it either way. I supported your motion, I guess. Okay.
What cemetery was this?
Lakeside.
Lakeside.
Yes, Liz.
That's what we wanted to clarify.
I'm
Right.
sorry, yeah.
Okay.
Old business, 12A, Stolberg rezoning file number 17-021, second reading. Mr. O'Neill.
I will be brief. This is file number 17-021, which is seconding or adoption of a map amendment for the Stolberg rezoning request. And again, that's to go from R1A single family residential to RM1 attached single family residential. And this is on Union Lake Road, across from Carp.
Would you state that, what the existing zoning is and the proposed zoning?
Sure, it's R1A single family residential to RM1 attached single family residential.
Thank you.
Yes, west side of Union Lake Road across from Carpathian Drive.
Okay, I don't have any, so I've been over this a couple different times. Is there any board members have a question on this? I think it's appropriate use in the area that it's at, and I think it'll suit the needs of the township and the community as a whole. So, with that,
Mr. Supervisor, I move that we rezone the file number 17-021 from R1A to RM1 and authorize the amendment of the map accordingly.
I have motion looking for support.
Support.
Support by Mr. Ruggles. Motion, support, all in favor?
Aye.
I have it. Thank you very much. Moving 12B, mini rezoning, file number 18-002, second reading.
This is also a second reading for rezoning from local business to general business of the property at 6785 Highland Road. It's file number 18-002, and this is the old Chevrolet trophy shop right next to is it American Marine?
Yes.
Yes. And again, just second reading, we would recommend, the planning commission recommended after public hearing, as they did in the first file, that the rezoning be approved and the amendment, the appropriate amendment to the map be made.
Very good. Any questions from the board? This adds a little more continuity to that area.
It does.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to rezone the property from local business to general business, the mini rezoning, file number 18002.
Motion, looking for support?
I'll support.
Support from Andrew down the end. Support, all in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Thank you very much. Okay, item number 13, trustee comments. Andrew Voorhees.
The White Lake Historical Society does field trips to Kelly Fisk Farm if anyone's interested. They're available to school groups, Boy or Girl Scout troops, seniors, or any interested groups. If this is something that piques your interest, contact Marge or Ron, their Historical Society members, through the Historical Society website. Since 26, the Historical Society has a membership geared toward the younger age group of historians. It's called the Young Historians. They're ages of 5 to 10. And with this program, they hope to inspire interest in the history of White Lake, its early residents, and the Fisk Farm property by engaging children with a quarterly newsletter with puzzles, games, contests, fun farm facts, history. The membership fee is $3, and these parents do not have to be members in order for their kids to be members. Who in this room knows that March 26th is Kevin Nave Day in White Lake Township? He was a White Lake. This proclamation started in 2003. Major Kevin Nave was a Marine who died during Operation Iraqi Freedom. He graduated from Waterford Kettering, which is a Waterford School District, which is a White Lake School District also. He attended U of M on a reserve training officer day. So on March 26th, throughout, you can just think of Kevin Nave. That's what I'm looking for.
Thank you very much,
I'm
Andrea.
done.
Very, very much. Mr. Powell.
Two quick items. First of all, I couldn't help but notice that David Loosley did resign from the Planning Commission. I want to tell him and everyone that he provided a great deal of insight into this township and helped this township and the Planning Commission tremendously. And I wanted to thank David for his service all these years.
It was great.
Then I was asked a very interesting question by the planner from Commerce Township, who happened to be looking at White Lake Township for some reason in the old maps, and he looked back in 1940s Oakland County aerials, and he texted me and asked me if I knew how Alpine was built, because back in 1940 it was a cow pasture and a farmland. And obviously I have some speculation that the fill was used from building I-75 and 23 and various other things, but I thought maybe I'd go right to the source. My mother is at Independence Village, and so is Mrs. Stoic, who is the wife of Mr. Stoic, who actually built Alpine. And I did find that Alpine opened in 1962, and which happens to be at the same time that I learned how to ski, coincidentally. But it is, it was so interesting. She said he just loved operating that bulldozer so much, he just started pushing dirt and borrowing as much as he could until he built this great big hill. And that was her explanation of how Alpine came to be. So I'm still in the process of researching that. If anyone knows the history of that a great deal, I got a handout there, then I'd love to see them, and maybe we can document that for the Historic Society.
Yeah,
So
that's
thank
cool.
you.
Yeah, very cool. Mr. Roman.
Thanks, Rick. Well, I just wanted to take a minute to actually thank my own staff for all the work that they did in this year's tax season. We just finished another season receiving warrants to collect taxes and assessments and all the many adjustments from the Board of Review and the Michigan Tax Tribunal. We were asked to collect just over $41 million. We were actually able to collect roughly 39.9 of that 41 million. Those that we collected for include Oakland County, our 5 school districts, Township, police, fire, and 59 township-related special assessment districts, as well as 8 county-related special assessment districts. We ended up turning over a delinquent roll to Oakland County of $1.2 million for real property taxes that we were not able to collect. Oakland County will front us that money and take the necessary steps to collect it. Also want to thank my staff for the hundreds of letters that we send every year. We send out letters to all of our low-income residents that need to reapply for summer deferments. All those taxpayers that pay their winter tax but forgot to pay their summer taxes, we send them letters. And then, again, hundreds of NSF amounts, wrong amounts paid, refunds due letters. And finally, as part of settlement, we ended up printing about 27 reports out of our software that literally took up thousands of pages. So, again, thanks to my staff.
There you go. Kudos. Okay, very good. Mr. Lilly.
A couple things. Many times that we've given Rick approval to negotiate changes and documents and whatever, and then those negotiated changes come back to the board for approval. I'd like to see that those documents that the township board approves, that if there's any changes in those, that they come back before the board for approval. I'd like to see the planning department, particularly like in the Four Corners project. I know the board had quite an extensive list of items that they needed to comply with for final site plan, because it doesn't come back before the board. That maybe you prepare something to let us know that, you know, the recommendations of the board have all been complied with, just for the record. Like to see the township a little bit, what Mike talked about, like to see the township set aside some money for some road improvements. They could be exactly what you talked about, but our roads come spring are going to be terrible, and I think it's maybe time that the township at least put some money into a fund that whatever extra monies we can get, or you know, if they're going to deteriorate past the point of what they already are, we're going to have to do something as far as the road millage or whatever. But they're really going to heck at this point, and some of them are getting beyond the point of even an overlay. I mentioned before the election precinct for Houghton School. We're talking currently with the White Lake Oaks. We're waiting for a verification, but we believe that as of today, without something in writing, that the Houghton School precinct will be at White Lake Oaks Golf Course. That'll be a dual precinct at this point. Rick, you have a copy of both of the library agreements that
Yes, I
you
do.
need to sign.
Yeah. Well, the one has been signed, the other one I have not signed.
And also, I want to thank my deputy for staying out late tonight, so. That's all I have.
Okay, Mr. Ruggles.
Actually, I'd just like to say good job to Mr. Kowal. He is pretty much totally responsible for the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund grant. So good job, Rick.
It's fun. I'm enjoying it because I think it's a great cause. So
You put a lot of time into it, so you should be recognized for that. Good.
thank you. Liz?
Okay, hopefully I can read my scribbles here. So yes, this is a very exciting time in White Lake, as I've said many times before, but this just adds to it. And I want to thank my colleagues for seeing the right future here for White Lake and making a really good choice for our residents today and moving forward with this acquisition. And of course, I want to mention the February meeting is Wednesday, March 28th at 6:45 at the lower level. I want to thank again, I want to thank Officer Snow again for her amazing life-saving skills. We are so lucky to have her amongst our finest here in White Lake. And I did want to mention, just since my time on the board, this is the second time that we have recognized Officer Snow for saving a life here in White Lake. So it's incredible. I'd like to thank both chiefs Chief Keller and Chief Gurka for a wonderful Fire and Police Award dinner that we all attended on Saturday at the VFW Hall. Again, are so incredibly lucky to have the very best in White Lake, and we really do. We have the very best. And I also wanted to mention that it was really nice to have the evening with my colleagues. We don't get to socialize. We're not allowed to be together, so it was enjoyable to be with all of you, so thank you. And then I want to address just a couple things that are going on in our community that are kind of interesting right now. I've had some residents contact me concerned about a planned walkout tomorrow in our schools. And whether you choose to walk out or walk up is none of my concern as a trustee. But what I want to encourage our parents and caregivers is to take this opportunity to communicate with your students. Ask them about their mental health. Are they lonely? Are they depressed? Are they bullied? Are they the bully? If for those of you not familiar with the walk up, it's an alternative to the walk out, and they're asking students to walk up to other students that maybe are the loner or the one that is socially awkward or might, be of concern in the student body. So I just want to take this opportunity to talk to students and parents in our community that it's really important. Talk to your kids. You might be surprised how smart they are and how much they know, or you might be surprised on how naive they are and they're not sure of a safe escape route. And heaven forbid if they needed it. So I just want to address that I know many parents are concerned about this. And so I just want to offer an alternative to just make sure you communicate about it. Also, I've been contacted by many residents this month of things that have been floating around social media that they'll contact us, that it's simply not true. So I've seen residents that have a lot of concern, and instead of coming to the board, they're going to social media and they're not getting the right answers. So I just want to encourage you that we're all here. My door is always open. Please email us, please call us to get the truthful and accurate information so we're not spreading, throughout the community and riling people up. So if you would like firsthand information, please come to our board. And then as we approach St. Patrick's Day, I want to make sure that everybody, of course, is safe on the roads. And I want to take the opportunity to thank our staff here at the Township and say that I know it's a little corny, but we are so incredibly lucky to have such wonderful and competent staff that we all work with and depend on here at the Township. And lastly, due to an early meeting here, we won't see you all until after Easter. So I want to wish everybody Easter and a blessed Passover. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Well, first of all, Scott, thanks for the kudos on that. It's really part of my job, but it's kind of the fun part of my job where I see something that I think there's an opportunity to fix something, make something better, and do an improvement that'll have an effect for a long period of time. And if we, and that is we as a community, can approach ideas like this and the board, we can go a long way and do a lot of things for this. It will set us up for generations to come. It is just a matter of time before the fill-in will start, and greater than what we have now. So it's very careful that we very craftingly, and that's the word I'm going to use, very craftingly provide things to the community in such a manner that we think for that long term. And let's see what happens, and hopefully it'll all work out. And then we can move on to some other things and look to some exciting things that we can do with the members of that community and the community as a whole, because the lake belongs to Lake Township, and kill, like I say, a lot of birds with one stone. So it's a great thing. So everyone be healthy, be happy, have a great evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Carol, we love you. And I would like to at the moment, make a motion to go into executive session to approve and to recess in a closed session to consider attorney-client privilege communication in accordance with MCL 15.268H, and to approval into recessed into closed session for strategic and negotiation connected with a collective bargaining agreement in accordance with MCL 15.268C. Roll call vote.
Support.
I'll support, thank you. Motion, support, roll call vote. Small technicality there.
Scott Ruggles,
Yes.
Mike Powell, Andrea Voorhees, Liz Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Roman,
Yes.
Mr. Lowell votes yes, Mr. Supervisor.
Yes. Take a 7-minute recess.
Or we can just go in your office.